It was a typical Friday evening at Carter's Bistro, a high-end, trendy restaurant nestled in the heart of Manhattan. The clink of glasses, the sizzle of the grill, and the hum of conversations filled the air. The bustling kitchen was a well-oiled machine, and the staff was in their element, effortlessly navigating the rush of diners eager to sample the finest culinary creations in the city. Chef Jack Carter, the man behind the restaurant's success, moved quickly and confidently between the kitchen stations, making sure every dish was prepared to perfection. His reputation was legendary. He wasn't just a chef, he was a culinary artist. But this night was about to take a turn for the unexpected. The front door swung open, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The host, Emily, glanced up from her podium, a smile spreading across her face. But as her gaze locked with the figure in the doorway, her smile faltered. Standing there in a sharp suit, with his trademark confidence and signature orange-hued hair, was none other than Donald Trump. The room, still bustling with the usual Friday night chatter, suddenly went silent. People turned their heads, whispering and pointing discreetly. Trump, with his signature smirk, strutted in like he owned the place. Emily, a seasoned hostess who had dealt with all sorts of VIPs, struggled to maintain her composure. This wasn't just any celebrity. This was Donald Trump, former president, real estate mogul, and an incredibly divisive figure in American politics. The moment was electric with anticipation. As the whispers spread like wildfire, Jack Carter remained oblivious, his focus entirely on his work. He'd been around celebrities and powerful figures enough to not be fazed by their presence, but something about tonight felt different. As he carefully plated the evening's special, a seared scallop dish with a delicate lemon butter sauce, he felt a sudden shift in the energy of the room. Maria, his sous chef, walked up beside him, her face tense. "Chef, you won't believe who just walked in," she said, her voice low, almost in disbelief. Jack didn't look up. "Don't tell me. Another food critic?" Maria shook her head, her eyes flickering toward the dining room. "No, it's Trump. Donald Trump." The knife in Jack's hand froze midair. He looked up at Maria, his expression unreadable. For a moment, everything in the kitchen seemed to stop. His pulse quickened, his mind racing. Trump? Here? The man who had become the embodiment of everything Jack despised. Greed, power, division. Jack's stomach tightened. This wasn't just another VIP. This was a person who represented the very values that Jack had spent his entire career trying to avoid. "Are you sure?" Jack asked, his voice low but intense. Maria nodded, her eyes wide. "He's sitting at the best table in the house. Emily's already seating him. He's looking around like he owns the place." Jack exhaled sharply, trying to steady himself. He didn't need to see Trump to know what kind of person he was. The tabloids, the news cycles, Jack had followed it all. Trump wasn't just a businessman. He was a symbol of everything Jack had fought against his entire life. And now, here he was, standing in his restaurant, expecting to be served as if he were just another patron. Jack's mind raced with conflicting emotions. His first instinct was to let it go, to smile, nod, and serve him like any other customer. But deep down, he knew he couldn't do that. He didn't have to serve him. He didn't have to put up with it. "Maria," Jack said, his voice steady but filled with resolve, "tell Emily I'm not serving him." Maria blinked in surprise, unsure if Jack was joking. "What? You're serious?" "I'm dead serious," Jack replied, turning back to the grill and flipping the scallops with a practiced hand. "I won't serve him. Let someone else take care of him." Maria stood there for a moment, still trying to process what Jack was saying. Finally, she nodded, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. "You sure about this, chef?" "I'm sure," Jack said without looking back. He didn't need to explain himself. This wasn't just about food. It was about standing up for his beliefs, for his values. The tension in the air was palpable as Maria walked back to the front. Jack could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. He knew it wouldn't be easy. This wasn't just about a refusal to serve a customer. It was about taking a stand. For Jack, that stand was everything. As Maria delivered the message to Emily, the host's face shifted from confusion to shock. She tried to reason with Jack, but he stood firm. In the back of his mind, he knew this was going to be a turning point. The decision was made, and there would be consequences. Back in the dining area, Trump sat down, unaware of the brewing storm in the kitchen. He glanced at the menu, looking entirely at ease, as though he was used to this kind of attention. The staff hovered nervously, unsure of what to do next. Jack stood in the kitchen, his arms folded. This wasn't just about food anymore. This was about power, pride, and the price of standing up for what you believe in. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The tension was building, and Jack could already feel the weight of the storm approaching. Would he back down, or would he hold his ground? The story had only just begun. Jack Carter had always been a man driven by passion, the kind of passion that was fueled by determination and hard work. Born in a small town in upstate New York, he came from humble beginnings. His parents were blue-collar workers, his father a mechanic, his mother a schoolteacher, and they taught him the values of integrity, hard work, and respect. Jack's father, Robert, had always been a man of few words, but the lessons he imparted to Jack were clear and unspoken. If you're going to do something, do it right. And don't let anyone make you feel small. Growing up, Jack spent most of his time in the kitchen. His mother would often invite him in to help with dinner, and by the time he was a teenager, he had mastered the art of creating simple yet flavorful meals. But his passion for food went beyond the act of cooking. It was about bringing people together, about creating something that could bring joy, comfort, and satisfaction. And that's what he loved about being a chef. For him, food was more than just sustenance. It was an experience, an art form, and a way of connecting with others. After high school, Jack moved to New York City to attend the prestigious Culinary Institute of America. It was here that he learned the technical skills that would eventually make him a star in the restaurant industry. But it was also here that he became disillusioned with the world of fine dining. The culinary world was a place of cutthroat competition, where success was measured not only by the food you made, but by the connections you had, the influence you wielded, and the money you brought in. Jack quickly rose through the ranks, working at several high-profile restaurants, each one pushing him to refine his skills and his craft. But with each promotion came a growing sense of dissatisfaction. It wasn't the food that bothered him. It was the industry itself, the greed, the pretentiousness, the constant pressure to cater to the whims of the rich and famous. It was a world that rewarded status over substance, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was in one of those high-end restaurants that Jack first encountered the man he would come to dislike with such intensity, Donald Trump. At the time, Trump was a fixture in the New York City elite scene, known for his wealth, his brash personality, and his controversial political views. Jack had never been one to pay much attention to politics, but he couldn't ignore the way Trump carried himself. His arrogance, his self-centeredness, his blatant disregard for the values that Jack held dear. These were qualities that Jack found repulsive. It wasn't just his business practices or his politics that bothered Jack. It was the way Trump seemed to believe that his wealth and power made him above everyone else. The way he treated people as if they were mere tools to be used, discarded when they were no longer of any use to him. One night, Trump dined at the restaurant where Jack worked as the sous chef. Jack had been preparing a special tasting menu, and he'd poured his heart into every dish. When it was time for the course to be served to Trump, Jack, with his usual meticulous attention to detail, personally delivered the plate. As he set the dish down in front of Trump, the billionaire barely glanced at it, let alone acknowledge the effort that went into making it. Instead, he looked up from his phone and waved his hand dismissively, saying, "This doesn't look like anything special." Jack stood frozen for a moment, the weight of those words hanging in the air. It wasn't just an insult to his food. It was an insult to everything he stood for. That was the moment Jack realized that no amount of wealth or status could ever justify treating people with such disregard. Over the years, Jack's dislike for Trump grew, especially as he watched the businessman's rise to political power. He couldn't help but feel that Trump represented everything that was wrong with the world. A man who was willing to divide, to manipulate, and to exploit for personal gain. And as Jack climbed the ladder of success in the culinary world, he began to believe that the restaurant industry, much like the world outside of it, was becoming more about money and power than about the craft itself. But Jack never let go of his core belief that food could still bring people together. That was why he started Carter's Bistro, a place where passion and authenticity could flourish without the distractions of celebrity culture. He built the restaurant on the idea that good food should be accessible to everyone, not just those who could afford a $1,000 bottle of wine. And he made sure that the staff was treated with respect, that the atmosphere was warm, and that the diners felt like they were part of something bigger than just a meal. Jack's restaurant quickly became a favorite for locals and tourists alike. But despite the growing success of Carter's Bistro, Jack kept his distance from the world of the rich and famous. He believed that the people who valued authenticity and real connection were the ones who mattered. The restaurant's popularity wasn't built on celebrity endorsements or corporate sponsors. It was built on the idea that food, when done right, could transcend all of that. That night, when Donald Trump walked into Carter's Bistro, Jack knew immediately that he would refuse to serve him. It wasn't just because of his political views or his wealth. It was because Jack had spent his entire career building a space where everyone was treated equally, where customers were valued not because of who they were or how much they could pay, but because they appreciated the effort, the passion, and the love that went into every dish. Jack couldn't, in good conscience, serve someone who stood for the opposite of everything he believed in. But the decision to refuse Trump wasn't an easy one. Jack knew that it could have serious consequences, both for his restaurant and his career. Yet, as he stood in the kitchen that night, preparing for the dinner rush, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity. This was the moment he had been waiting for. This was his chance to stand up for something bigger than just food. This was his chance to show the world that integrity still mattered. As he glanced out from the kitchen, his eyes met Maria's. She was busy plating a dish, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. Maria had always respected Jack's passion and his principles, and she knew that tonight, he was about to make a decision that would change everything. "Are you sure about this, chef?" Maria asked, her voice steady but filled with concern. Jack looked at her, his eyes firm. "I'm sure. It's the right thing to do." Maria nodded, and for a moment, they both stood there in silence, knowing that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Jack turned back to the stove, his mind made up. He didn't know how the night would end, or what the consequences would be. But he knew one thing for sure. Refusing to serve Donald Trump was a stand he had to take, no matter what. As the minutes passed, Jack stood in the kitchen, his hands moving automatically, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't help but feel the weight of his decision bearing down on him. Refusing to serve Donald Trump, no matter how principled it was, could bring all sorts of trouble. He knew that celebrities and powerful figures could make or break a restaurant, and Trump was no ordinary figure. His presence, his power, his influence. These were all factors that Jack couldn't ignore, even if he wanted to. Outside the kitchen, the mood in Carter's Bistro was tense. Emily, the hostess, was doing her best to maintain composure, but the discomfort was palpable. She had already passed Jack's message along to Trump's table. The moment Trump had heard that the chef himself refused to serve him, he raised an eyebrow, his face hardening slightly, but he'd stayed calm, too calm. Now, his large entourage sat around him, exchanging whispers and eyeing the other diners with quiet judgment. The silence in the dining room was almost deafening. The regulars who dined at Carter's Bistro were used to the low hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware, and the occasional laughter that filled the room. But tonight, there was none of that. The usual upbeat energy had been replaced by an awkward stillness. People who had come to enjoy a quiet dinner now found themselves stealing glances toward Trump's table, wondering what would happen next. Maria and the other staff members exchanged nervous glances in the kitchen, unsure of what to do. No one had ever refused service to a guest before, not at Carter's Bistro, and certainly not to someone like Trump. Would Jack's decision cause chaos? Would it be the end of the restaurant's reputation? "Chef," Maria's voice broke through Jack's thoughts. She stood at the kitchen door, her face a mix of concern and curiosity. "What do we do now?" Jack paused, wiping his hands on his apron. The food on the stove was sizzling, but the decision weighed heavier on him than any culinary task. "We stick to the plan," he replied, his voice steady. We serve everyone else, and we don't bend. Maria didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. She knew Jack, and she understood his resolve. Still, there was a sense of unease in her expression. She had been by his side through countless challenges, but this felt different. The atmosphere in the restaurant was thick with tension. They could hear snippets of conversations from the dining room, and it was clear that everyone was wondering what Jack would do next. Back at Trump's table, the billionaire leaned back in his chair, a look of irritation creeping into his features. He had heard about Jack's refusal from Emily, the hostess, but his reaction wasn't one of shock or surprise. It was annoyance. After all, he was used to getting his way. In the world of luxury restaurants, where money and influence could open any door, Jack's stance was a rare and bold exception. Trump wasn't used to being refused service, and the thought that a chef, any chef, might take a stand against him irked him deeply. Are you telling me, Trump's voice rang out, sharp and controlled, that this restaurant, of all places, refuses to serve me? Do you have any idea who I am? Emily, ever the professional, stood her ground. I'm sorry, Mr. Trump, but Chef Jack Carter has made it clear that he will not serve you tonight. Trump leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. I don't care who the chef is. Tell him to come out here and apologize. I didn't come all the way here to be disrespected. Emily faltered, her heart racing. She had no idea how to handle this. This wasn't just any customer. It was Donald Trump. His reputation for being volatile and unpredictable had made him infamous, and Emily didn't want to be the one caught in the crossfire. She turned to glance toward the kitchen, where she could see the shadow of Jack moving behind the kitchen door. Her stomach churned, wondering if he would come out and face this head-on. Meanwhile, Jack remained in the kitchen, his eyes focused on the dish in front of him. It was a test of will, and he wasn't about to back down now. He couldn't. This wasn't just about food. It was about integrity, about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. Jack, Maria called out again, her voice now a mix of concern and urgency. Emily's telling me that Trump wants you to come out and apologize. This could get really ugly, Chef. What do we do if he causes a scene? Jack took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. If he wants to make a scene, let him. We'll deal with it. But we don't apologize. We never apologize for standing up for what we believe in. Maria nodded, clearly uneasy, but still loyal to Jack. I'll back you up. The kitchen was still, the only sound the gentle bubbling of a sauce simmering on the stove. Jack stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on him. It was moments like this that defined a person. Moments when the world seemed to demand you compromise your beliefs for the sake of convenience or safety. But Jack wasn't about to give in. He'd worked too hard to build Carter's Bistro into something that was more than just a restaurant. It was a place where people could come together, share a meal, and find common ground. He refused to let that integrity be compromised for anything or anyone. Outside the kitchen, Emily and Trump continued their exchange. The billionaire's patience was clearly wearing thin. This is outrageous, Trump muttered, standing up abruptly. He made a motion to leave but paused, glancing toward the other diners. His entourage shifted nervously in their seats. Trump had a reputation for making quick decisions when he didn't get his way, and the staff knew that his next move could either be a final, explosive tantrum or a quiet exit. The tension was rising, and Jack knew that this was just the beginning. Would Trump lash out in anger, or would he back down? Either way, Jack knew that the consequences of his decision were now inescapable. The storm had already begun, and Carter's Bistro was about to be thrust into the spotlight in a way it never had before. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story is just heating up. What do you think will happen next? Do you think Jack made the right call? The suspense was unbearable. As Trump stood up from his table, the atmosphere in Carter's Bistro shifted dramatically. The clink of silverware ceased. The murmur of conversation stopped. All eyes were on the man who had built an empire and now seemed intent on proving that he could have anything he wanted, even if it meant forcing his way into Jack's personal principles. Tell your chef I'm leaving, and that he's made a big mistake, Trump snapped, his voice low and filled with disdain. He turned on his heel, his entourage following quickly behind. But the tension lingered, thick and heavy in the air. No one dared to move. It felt like the restaurant was holding its breath. In the kitchen, Maria wiped her hands nervously on her apron, her eyes flicking toward the door. Jack remained still, his posture stiff, his hands gripping the counter. He could hear the faint shuffle of footsteps as Trump's group moved toward the exit. And yet, despite everything, Jack's resolve didn't waver. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. This was the moment. It was more than just a disagreement over food. It was a stand against everything that Jack felt was wrong in the world. The sense of pride, of righteousness, overwhelmed any doubt that might have crept in. Then, as Trump reached the door, something unexpected happened. Trump turned back, his eyes scanning the room, and then he looked directly at Jack. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his gaze that Jack couldn't quite decipher. Was it anger? Dismissal? Or maybe a challenge? Trump seemed to realize that something more was at play here, something that couldn't be bought or bullied into submission. "You'll regret this," Trump called over his shoulder, before walking out into the night. The door closed behind him with a soft chime, but the weight of his words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Jack remained frozen for a moment, the entire restaurant still buzzing with a mix of disbelief and shock. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. Was this truly the end of the matter? Or was something else about to unfold? Maria was the first to break the silence. She stepped forward, her voice low but steady. "That was intense," she said, her tone a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Are we going to be okay, Chef?" Jack let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. "We'll be fine," he said, his voice firm but tinged with exhaustion. "We've done the right thing. Now we just have to face whatever comes next." He turned to the rest of the team, who had gathered quietly behind him. "All right, folks, back to work. There's still a dinner service to get through, and we've got loyal customers who deserve the best." With a mix of nervous energy and resolve, the staff got back to their duties. But the night would never be the same. The air was electric, charged with the knowledge that the restaurant had just made a powerful statement. But the question was, how would the world react? Hours later, as the last dishes were being cleared and the final guests were finishing their meals, Jack sat at the back of the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. His mind was still racing. He hadn't expected Trump to make a scene, but part of him had known that refusing to serve someone of his stature would inevitably spark some kind of reaction. What he didn't expect was how quickly that reaction would come. Jack's phone buzzed on the table, and he glanced at it, his heart skipping a beat. The screen was filled with notifications from social media. His eyes widened as he scrolled through them. Hashtag Chef Jack Carter refuses Trump trending on Twitter. The tweets were coming in fast. Some were supportive, some were harsh. Some applauded his courage, while others accused him of disrespecting a powerful man. The comments section was a battleground of opinions, with people passionately defending both sides. It was clear that Jack's refusal had ignited a firestorm. One tweet stood out above the rest, catching Jack's attention immediately. "Chef Jack Carter just stood up to Donald Trump, and I'm here for it. Hashtag stand your ground, hashtag refuse to bow down." Jack felt a surge of relief. It was one of the first positive reactions he had seen, but he knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more backlash, more support, more controversy. The world was watching, and the consequences of his decision were just starting to unfold. As he sat there, lost in thought, Maria entered the back room, her face pale but determined. "Chef," she said, her voice trembling, "I've just heard from the manager. The press is calling. They want a statement from you." Jack rubbed his temples. The press. He hadn't expected it to escalate this quickly. "What did you tell them?" Maria hesitated. "I told them that we weren't offering a statement yet, but they said they'll be outside tomorrow morning for an interview. They're all over social media talking about this. I think it's going viral." Jack closed his eyes for a moment, trying to absorb the enormity of the situation. This was bigger than he ever imagined. It wasn't just about refusing to serve one man. It was about standing up against the system that perpetuated power imbalances. And now, he was in the eye of the storm. "Okay," Jack said, finally lifting his head to look at Maria. "Let them come, but we'll do this on our terms. I'm not backing down." Maria gave him a nod of solidarity. "We've got your back, Chef." Always. As the kitchen slowly quieted down and the last of the staff filed out, Jack sat in the silence, the weight of what was to come settling around him. This wasn't just about food anymore. It was about something far greater. Jack knew that the restaurant and everything he had built were about to be tested in ways he never imagined. The journey ahead was going to be long and unpredictable. But one thing was certain. Jack Carter wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not ever. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story is heating up. What do you think Jack's next move should be? And what do you think the consequences will be? Stay tuned. This isn't over yet. The stakes were higher than ever. The restaurant had taken a stand, and now it was time for the world to watch what would happen next. Would Jack's decision prove to be a turning point in his career? Or would it tear everything he had worked for apart? The answers were just beginning to unfold. The following morning, the city was buzzing. News outlets were running stories, social media was alive with debates, and the lines between support and condemnation were being drawn more clearly by the minute. The name Carter's Bistro had spread far beyond the usual circle of regulars. Now, it was on the lips of politicians, celebrities, and food critics alike. Jack's decision had caused ripples, and they were quickly turning into waves. By noon, a swarm of reporters stood outside the restaurant, cameras ready, microphones in hand, all hoping for a glimpse of the chef who had refused to serve the most talked-about man in America. The air was thick with anticipation, and inside the restaurant, the staff could feel it. Maria paced nervously in the back, glancing at the clock every few seconds. Emily stood by the front door, trying to keep things as normal as possible, but it was clear that the quiet charm of Carter's Bistro had been shattered. The restaurant was now a spectacle. Jack sat in the back office, staring at his phone. The buzz of notifications had not stopped since the night before. He had received calls from people he hadn't heard from in years, old friends, acquaintances, even former mentors, offering congratulations or warnings, depending on their stance. Some had praised his bravery, while others had warned him that this would be the end of his career. But the one thing Jack couldn't shake was the overwhelming feeling of uncertainty that gnawed at him. Could he survive this? Could Carter's Bistro withstand the fallout of his decision? His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from the restaurant's lawyer, reminding him of the importance of handling the press carefully. But Jack wasn't thinking about legal implications at the moment. His thoughts were focused on what really mattered: his team, his values, and the heart of what he had built. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Maria poked her head in. "Chef," she said softly, "they're ready for you out front. They want an interview, and they're asking for you directly." Jack closed his eyes for a moment. This was the moment he had dreaded and anticipated all night. He had been bracing himself for this conversation, but no amount of preparation could truly steel him for what lay ahead. "Okay," Jack replied, his voice more steady than he felt. "Let's do this." The front of the restaurant was a circus. Reporters from various outlets crowded around, their cameras flashing and their voices rising in an almost unbearable din. The street outside was blocked off by news vans, their satellite dishes perched like eager vultures, waiting for a scoop. The restaurant, once a quiet haven, had turned into a spectacle. People walking by stared curiously, some stopping to take photos, others simply shaking their heads in disbelief. It was as if the world had gathered to witness a showdown. Jack stepped into the spotlight. His presence was commanding, but his eyes betrayed a quiet storm. He was tired, but there was a fire inside him now, a determination that had only grown stronger since last night. He wasn't about to be intimidated. He wasn't about to apologize. He had made a choice, and no matter what the world said, he would stand by it. The reporters all rushed forward, firing questions in rapid succession. Flashbulbs popped. Microphones were thrust in his face. It was overwhelming, but Jack remained composed, his back straight and his gaze unwavering. He waited for them to calm down before speaking, his voice clear and firm. "I made a decision last night," Jack began, his words deliberate. "A decision based on my beliefs, my values, and my commitment to creating a space where people can feel welcome, no matter who they are or where they come from. My restaurant has always stood for inclusivity, respect, and integrity. When I refused to serve Donald Trump, it wasn't about politics. It wasn't about the man himself. It was about standing up for what's right. The crowd fell silent. For a moment, there was only the sound of distant traffic. Jack could feel the weight of their eyes on him, but he didn't falter. I knew that this decision would come with consequences, he continued, his voice growing stronger. But I also knew that if I didn't stand by my principles, I would be betraying everything I've worked for, everything that this restaurant stands for. And I won't do that. I won't bow down to anyone who thinks they can intimidate me, or anyone else. A reporter raised his hand, eager to jump in. So, you're saying that if Trump had been anyone else, you would have served him? Or do you believe your actions were justified because of his political standing? Jack took a breath, thinking carefully before answering. He was no politician, but he had learned over the years how to speak the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. I'm not a politician, he replied, but I do believe that everyone deserves respect. And last night, I didn't feel that respect was being extended in the way that I expect from anyone, regardless of who they are. This isn't about politics. It's about basic human decency. The reporters were scribbling notes, eyes wide with interest. Jack could tell that this wasn't the answer they had been expecting. Many of them had anticipated a defensive response, an apology perhaps. But Jack wasn't going to apologize for standing up for what he believed in. Another reporter spoke up. But chef, this could have severe consequences for your business. Do you really think it was worth it? Jack's gaze hardened. He had heard this question many times before, both from friends and strangers. It was the question that always followed any decision to go against the grain. Life's about making choices, Jack said, his voice steady. Sometimes those choices are difficult, and sometimes they have consequences. But if you don't stand up for what's right, then what's the point? I'd rather lose everything and stay true to myself than gain the world and lose my integrity. A silence fell over the crowd. It wasn't a comfortable silence, but it was one of respect. Jack had spoken his truth, and, for the first time in what felt like ages, he felt the weight of that truth settle in his chest. As the interview came to a close, Jack knew that the battle was far from over. The consequences of his actions would continue to ripple out in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. Some people would cheer him on, while others would condemn him. But one thing was certain. The world was watching, and Carter's Bistro had become the epicenter of a conversation that extended far beyond the walls of the restaurant. As he turned to head back inside, the weight of everything that had happened, everything that was still to come, pressed heavily on his shoulders. But deep down, Jack knew one thing. No matter what came next, he had stayed true to himself. And that was all that mattered. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The story isn't over yet. What do you think of Jack's stand? Do you believe he made the right call? The storm may have passed, but the aftermath is just beginning. Stay tuned for what happens next. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The media circus that had descended upon Carter's Bistro showed no signs of slowing down. Every major news outlet had covered the story, some framing it as a brave stand for principles, while others saw it as a reckless stunt that could cost Jack everything. The public reaction was split. Some applauded Jack for his courage, while others decried him for being disrespectful and divisive. By the third day after the incident, Jack was exhausted. His phone was constantly ringing, flooded with calls from reporters, business partners, and even former colleagues. He had given a few interviews, but he was growing tired of repeating the same message over and over. All he wanted was to go back to the kitchen, to focus on the food, to reclaim some sense of normalcy. But it felt impossible. Inside Carter's Bistro, things had started to settle into a strange new rhythm. The staff was working with the same precision and care they always did, but there was an underlying tension. Every time the door opened, the staff would glance up, wondering if another camera crew was waiting outside. Jack had been hearing rumors that protests were being organized, that people were planning to picket outside the restaurant. The pressure was mounting from all sides. Maria entered the back office, a concerned look on her face. "Chef, we've got another group of reporters waiting outside," she said, her voice tense. "They're asking if you're going to make a statement about the protests. They say it's only a matter of time before they start showing up here." Jack sighed deeply, rubbing his eyes. He had expected this. There would always be consequences, and this was one he couldn't escape. But even in the face of mounting pressure, Jack remained resolute. His decision had been made, and there was no going back. "We'll deal with it," Jack said quietly. "I'll go out and talk to them. We can't let this get out of hand." When Jack stepped outside, the scene was chaotic. A crowd of reporters stood at the entrance of the restaurant, their cameras pointed directly at him. Behind them, a small group of protesters had gathered, holding signs that read, "Respect the office," and "Boycott Carter's Bistro." The air was thick with tension, but Jack stood tall, his face calm despite the storm swirling around him. One of the reporters stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Chef Carter, do you have a comment on the protests? People are angry, and many are calling for you to apologize. What do you say to them?" Jack paused for a moment, taking in the sight of the protesters. Their anger was palpable, but so was their passion. He could understand why they felt the way they did. People didn't like to see their leaders challenged, especially by someone they considered beneath them. But Jack knew that he wasn't going to apologize for standing up for what he believed in. "I won't apologize," Jack said firmly, his voice carrying across the crowd. "I did what I felt was right. I didn't do it to disrespect anyone, but to stand up for my values. I believe in respect. I believe in decency. And if that offends some people, then I'm okay with that." The reporter pushed further. "But don't you think your actions were divisive? You've alienated a lot of people." Jack nodded. "I understand that. But sometimes, you have to make tough choices, even if they upset people. I would rather stand by my principles than bow to pressure." The protesters didn't like that answer. One of them shouted, "You can't just refuse to serve someone because of their beliefs. That's not right." Jack took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I didn't refuse to serve anyone because of their beliefs. I refused to serve someone who I felt wasn't treating others with respect. It's not about politics. It's about treating people with dignity, no matter who they are." The protesters sneered, but the rest of the crowd fell into a tense silence. For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. Then, slowly, the protesters began to disperse, grumbling as they walked away. The reporters, sensing the end of the confrontation, turned their cameras off, but the air still hung heavy with the weight of Jack's words. Maria stepped beside him, her face conflicted. "That went better than I expected. But are we going to be okay? I mean, are we really going to survive this?" Jack glanced at her, his expression softening. "I don't know, Maria. I can't predict the future, but I know that we did the right thing. And sometimes, doing the right thing comes with a cost." The following week was filled with the kind of uncertainty that only comes with public scrutiny. Business was slower than usual. There were still regular customers who came in, offering supportive words and asking about the ongoing situation. But there were also those who stayed away, angry or upset about the incident. The restaurant was quieter than usual, and Jack could feel the weight of it every time he stepped into the dining room. But then something unexpected happened. Late on a Thursday afternoon, as Jack was preparing for the evening rush, a familiar face walked into the restaurant. It was Tim, an old friend of Jack's who had been a mentor to him in the early days of his career. Tim had always been a staunch supporter of Jack, and when he walked in now, there was a look of pride in his eyes. "Hey, Jack," Tim said, his voice warm. "I heard about what happened, and I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you." Jack blinked, surprised by the sentiment. "Thanks, Tim. That means a lot." Tim nodded, sitting down at the bar. "I know it's been tough, but you did the right thing. Sometimes it takes a lot of courage to stand up for what you believe in, and I think people are starting to realize that." Jack smiled faintly. "I hope so. It's been a crazy few days. I can't tell what's going to happen next." "Well, whatever happens, you've got my support," Tim said, clapping Jack on the shoulder. "You've earned it, and in the end, that's all that matters. The rest? It'll sort itself out." And as Jack looked around the restaurant, the uncertainty he had been feeling for days began to lift, if only just a little. He had made his stand, and no matter what came next, he knew he had done it for the right reasons. By the end of the month, business had started to pick up again. The protesters had moved on to other causes, the media storm had calmed, and the world seemed to be moving on. But Jack knew something had changed. Carter's Bistro had survived the test, and so had he. His decision to stand up for his principles had cost him in some ways, but it had also earned him the respect of those who mattered most, the ones who believed in him. It was a hard lesson learned, but Jack had learned it well, and as he walked through the kitchen, back to the line, he felt something that had been missing for a long time: peace. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Jack's journey has been one for the history books. What did you think about his decision? Was it worth the cost? Or do you think he should have handled things differently? Let's keep the conversation going. As the days turned into weeks, Jack could feel the heavy weight of the past slowly starting to lift. The protests had faded, the cameras had moved on, and the media had found new stories to cover. But in his heart, Jack knew that the echoes of his decision would last far longer than the headlines. The bistro was back to its familiar rhythm. The staff had returned to their roles, though with a noticeable sense of renewed pride. People who had initially criticized Jack for his actions had either softened their stance or disappeared into the background, while others, those who had supported him from the start, had become even more vocal in their admiration. The customers who continued to visit were those who valued the integrity of the restaurant, those who wanted to dine in a place that stood for something more than just food. One evening, as the sun began to set and the soft golden light filtered through the restaurant's windows, Jack stood at the back, watching the kitchen staff work with a sense of quiet satisfaction. He had lived through the storm, and now, with time and patience, things were settling into place. His restaurant was thriving once again, but Jack wasn't the only one who had been changed by the events. His team, too, had transformed in ways they hadn't anticipated. Maria, who had been so worried in the beginning, now walked with a newfound confidence. She had been with Jack since the early days of Carter's Bistro, and she had always been there to support him. But seeing how he had handled the situation, how he had refused to back down, had inspired something deep within her. One night, after the dinner rush, Maria approached Jack as he was taking a break. Her eyes sparkled with an excitement he hadn't seen before. "Chef, I've been thinking," she said, her voice tentative but full of conviction. "I want to take the next step. I want to be more involved in the business side of things. I've been managing the kitchen, but I'm ready to learn more about running the restaurant. What do you think?" Jack smiled, a sense of pride welling up inside him. He had always seen Maria's potential. She had grown into a strong, capable leader, and it was time for her to take the reins alongside him. "I think that's a great idea, Maria," Jack replied. "You've been an integral part of this place for years. I couldn't do it without you. Let's figure out a way to make that happen." It wasn't just Maria who was ready to evolve. Even Emily, the quiet and reserved front-of-house manager, had found her voice. She had been unsure about the fallout in the beginning, hesitant to take sides. But watching Jack's unwavering commitment had instilled a sense of purpose in her. She'd started pushing for changes to the restaurant's atmosphere, suggesting new ideas to make the dining experience even more welcoming and unique. The next few months saw Carter's Bistro embracing a new direction. They began holding themed dinner events to celebrate diversity, inviting speakers, musicians, and artists from all backgrounds to join in the experience. The restaurant, once just a local eatery, had become a place where people could share not just a meal but a message. And through it all, Jack continued to work in the kitchen, perfecting his craft. He knew that no matter what, the food was always the most important part. But now, there was something more to it. The food was a reflection of the values that had guided him through the storm. One evening, Jack was working late, alone in the kitchen. It had been a particularly busy day, and he was wiping down the countertops, lost in thought. The restaurant was quiet now, the last of the patrons having left, but the clatter of pots and pans still echoed in the back. The door to the kitchen opened, and Maria stepped in, holding a plate of food. She placed it gently in front of Jack with a smile. "I thought you might need a little something after tonight," she said. Jack looked down at the plate. It was a new dish, a fresh take on an old favorite, crafted from the finest local ingredients, perfectly balanced. He smiled back at Maria, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "This is incredible," Jack said. "You've really outdone yourself." Maria shrugged modestly. "It's not just me. It's the team. We've all been pushing each other to grow. Jack picked up his fork and took a bite, savoring the flavors. This dish, this new direction, it was everything they had worked toward. It wasn't just about food anymore. It was about community, about standing for something greater than themselves. Maria sat down across from him. You know, Chef, I think we're really doing something special here. Jack nodded, his gaze softening as he looked around the kitchen. The restaurant was no longer just a business. It had become a symbol, a place where the values he had fought for were reflected in every dish, every interaction, every customer who walked through the door. We've come a long way, Jack said quietly, and I think the best part is that we're just getting started. That night, after the last dish was served, Jack sat alone in the dining room, gazing out the window at the city lights. He could hardly believe how far Carter's Bistro had come. The restaurant had weathered the storm, and Jack had found himself stronger, more certain of his place in the world. It wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about something deeper. It was about standing firm, even when the world around you seemed to be in turmoil. It was about standing up for what you believed in, no matter the consequences. And most importantly, it was about the people, the team, the customers, the community, who had supported him along the way. Jack had learned that true success wasn't measured by the number of stars on the restaurant's review page or the size of the profits. It was measured by how true you could stay to your values, even in the face of adversity. As Jack stood up from the table, a sense of peace washed over him. He was ready for whatever came next. His restaurant was more than just a place to eat. It was a place where people could find something real, something worth believing in. And that, Jack knew, was worth everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Carter's Bistro may have weathered the storm, but Jack's journey is far from over. What do you think lies ahead for him? What lessons have you learned from his story? Keep following as this restaurant continues to defy expectations. In the months that followed, Carter's Bistro had settled into its new normal. Business was good. Customers were coming in steadily, some because they had heard about Jack's bold stand, others because they'd heard the food was better than ever. The small community around the restaurant had embraced the changes, and the team was more united than ever. But every business, no matter how successful, faces challenges. For Jack, the next test was about loyalty, loyalty to his values, to his team, and to the mission he had set for himself and his restaurant. One Thursday afternoon, Jack sat in his office, reviewing the restaurant's financials. The numbers were promising, but there was something gnawing at him, a sense of unease he couldn't shake. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Chef, you've got a visitor," Maria called from the hallway. Jack glanced at her, surprised. A visitor? Who? She opened the door, allowing a man in a well-tailored suit to step into the office. The man had a confident air about him, his sharp features illuminated by the afternoon sunlight. He offered Jack a firm handshake, which Jack accepted cautiously. "Jack Carter, I presume," the man said with a smile. "My name is Robert Goldstein. I'm a consultant in the restaurant industry, and I think we might be able to help you take Carter's Bistro to the next level." Jack raised an eyebrow, confused. "I don't usually work with consultants. I've always believed in doing things my way." Robert smiled again, clearly not taken aback by Jack's skepticism. "I understand, and I respect that. But hear me out. Your restaurant is doing well, but it could be doing so much better. I'm talking about expanding your brand, increasing your visibility, and bringing in more revenue. We can get you more press, more celebrity guests, and a bigger clientele." Jack's heart sank as he listened. He'd worked hard to build Carter's Bistro into a place of integrity and authenticity. The thought of losing that, of turning the restaurant into a media circus, was unsettling. But Robert continued, laying out his plan in great detail. He spoke of sponsorships, TV appearances, and high-profile partnerships with celebrities. "Think about it, Jack," Robert urged. "You've got the brand recognition. All you need is a push. We'll get you into the mainstream. Your restaurant could be one of the biggest in the country." Jack could feel the weight of the offer pressing down on him. This was the kind of opportunity that could change everything. More money, more customers, more exposure. It seemed like the perfect solution to grow his business. But something in his gut told him this wasn't the direction he wanted to go. "I appreciate the offer, Robert," Jack said, his voice calm but firm. "But I'm not interested. I've built this place on my own terms, and I'm not about to let anyone change that now." Robert's smile faltered for a moment, and Jack saw the subtle shift in his demeanor. "You're making a mistake," Robert said coolly. "You can't stay small forever. There's only so much you can do on your own. You need help to get to the next level." Jack stood up, meeting Robert's gaze directly. "I don't need help to become something I'm not. I'm not looking for fame or fortune. I just want to run a place where people feel welcome, where the food speaks for itself." Robert stared at him for a moment, his expression unreadable, before nodding curtly. "Well, Jack, I tried. But don't say I didn't warn you when your competitors leave you in the dust." With that, Robert turned on his heel and left the office, the door clicking shut behind him. For the next few days, Jack couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Robert's offer had come with more than just business opportunities. It had come with a challenge to his core beliefs. He spent late nights in the kitchen, working through his thoughts, trying to discern what was truly important. It was during one of these late-night sessions that Maria came in, wiping her hands on a towel. She had been with Jack long enough to understand when something was off. "Chef," she began quietly, "I know something's bothering you. Is it that guy who came by the other day?" Jack sighed and leaned against the counter. "Yeah, it's him. I can't stop thinking about it. He offered me everything: more press, more customers, more revenue. But at what cost?" Maria gave him a knowing look. "I can't imagine you would have said yes, but I get why you're torn. It's tempting. Who wouldn't want the success that comes with more recognition?" Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the decision. "It's not that simple, Maria. It's not about success. It's about what kind of success I want. I didn't open this restaurant to become the next celebrity hotspot. I did it because I wanted to create something real, something authentic." Maria placed a hand on his shoulder, offering her support. "You've built something beautiful here. Don't let anyone tell you it's not enough." The next day, Jack met with his team. They were all gathered in the break room, some of them sipping coffee, others going through the day's prep. Jack could sense their curiosity. After all, they had seen him struggling with the offer, but they didn't know the details. "I had a meeting with someone yesterday," Jack began, his voice steady. "A consultant who wanted to help expand Carter's Bistro, get us more press, more fame, more customers. He thought we could take it to the next level." The room was quiet, the staff listening intently. "I turned him down," Jack continued. "I'm not looking to turn this place into something it's not. This restaurant is about community. It's about the people we serve and the integrity we hold dear. And I don't want to compromise that for anything." A quiet murmur of approval rippled through the room. Maria nodded with pride, and even Emily, who had always been more reserved, smiled warmly. Jack paused, looking around the room. "You all are the heart of this place, and I trust that you believe in what we're doing here. So if you're all in, then we're going to continue down this path. Together." Without hesitation, Maria spoke up first. "We're with you, Chef. All the way." The rest of the team voiced their support, and Jack felt a surge of relief. In that moment, he knew he had made the right choice. He wasn't in this for the fame or the fortune. He was in it for something deeper, something more meaningful than what any consultant could offer. As Jack returned to the kitchen to prepare for the evening rush, he felt more certain than ever about the future of Carter's Bistro. He had faced the temptation of success, the allure of fame, and the pressure to conform to a system that didn't align with his values. But in the end, Jack had chosen loyalty to his beliefs, his team, and the people who mattered most. And that was enough. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Jack's journey continues to inspire us. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Would you have taken the deal or stuck to your principles? Let's talk about it in the comments below. As the months rolled by, Carter's Bistro continued to thrive, staying true to its core values while finding new ways to grow. The food was better than ever, the atmosphere inviting, and the team as tight-knit as any successful restaurant could hope for. Jack had made his peace with the decision to turn down Robert Goldstein's offer. His focus was now squarely on maintaining the authenticity and heart of the restaurant. But success doesn't always come without challenges. For Jack, the next obstacle came in the form of an unexpected rival, a new restaurant that had opened just a few blocks down the street. It wasn't long before Jack started to hear the whispers. Customers began mentioning a sleek new spot in the neighborhood, one that seemed to be generating a lot of buzz. The restaurant was called the Golden Fork, and its modern aesthetic, flashy marketing, and celebrity chef had attracted a lot of attention in a very short period of time. At first, Jack didn't think much of it. New restaurants opened all the time, and he had his own loyal customers who valued the genuine experience Carter's Bistro offered. But when a food critic published a glowing review of the Golden Fork, comparing it to the best fine dining establishments in the city, Jack couldn't ignore the fact that the competition was real. "Have you seen this?" Maria said, holding up her phone one morning during the pre-service meeting. "The Golden Fork's already getting rave reviews. People are calling it the next big thing." Jack frowned. "I've heard, but we've been around longer, and our customers know what we stand for." Maria nodded. "Yeah, but their social media's blowing up. They've got influencers posting about it, and they even have a few celebrities coming in already. It's all over the place." Jack's mind raced, but he kept his composure. Carter's Bistro had never been about the flashy exterior or big-name endorsements. It was about the food, the service, and the connections made in the dining room. "Let's stay focused," Jack said, his voice steady. "We don't need to chase trends. We just need to keep doing what we do best. We've got loyal customers who appreciate us for who we are, and that's what matters." But deep down, a part of Jack couldn't help but feel the sting of competition. He had worked hard to build Carter's Bistro into a beloved local institution. Now, with the Golden Fork quickly gaining ground, he wondered if he was doing enough to ensure the future of his restaurant. The days that followed were filled with tension. The Golden Fork's presence began to chip away at the sense of security Jack had once felt. More and more, customers who had previously dined at Carter's Bistro started to mention the Golden Fork. Some praised the trendy dishes, the sleek ambience, and the Instagram-worthy moments. It was clear that the new restaurant was drawing a crowd of people eager to be part of the next big thing. Jack noticed it in the restaurant, too. The once bustling dining room of Carter's Bistro was now quieter during prime hours. The energy that had once filled the space was beginning to fade. One evening, as Jack stood at the bar, observing the slow trickle of customers coming in, Maria approached him. "Chef, we need to talk," she said, her voice serious. Jack looked up at her, his expression weary. "I know. I've been thinking about it, too. It feels like we're losing some momentum." Maria nodded, her eyes focused on the tables around the room. "I think it's time we look at what the Golden Fork is doing. We've got to adapt somehow. Maybe it's not about changing what we stand for, but finding a way to capture some of that energy they've got." Jack didn't like the idea of having to adapt just because a new competitor had come to town. But the reality was undeniable. They couldn't ignore the fact that their business was being affected. And for the first time since the protests, Jack began to question if he had made a misstep by turning down Robert Goldstein's offer. The following week, Jack and Maria went to visit the Golden Fork incognito. They sat at a small table in the back, watching the place with a critical eye. The atmosphere was definitely different, flashy, modern, and very much aimed at a younger, social media-savvy crowd. The decor was high-end but cold, and the servers were dressed in trendy, form-fitting uniforms. It was clear that every detail had been meticulously curated for the Instagram moment. The food was undeniably impressive, creative, artistic dishes with a lot of flair. The presentation was perfect, and the flavors bold and exciting. But as they ate, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The food was excellent, but the heart of the place, the warmth, the personal touch, wasn't there. "That's impressive," Jack said, taking a sip of his drink. "But I don't know if I could ever create something like this." Maria glanced around, clearly not as taken by the experience as Jack had anticipated. "It's definitely a spectacle, but is it real? Are people really coming for the food, or just the experience?" Jack didn't respond immediately, taking a bite of the dish in front of him. He could see the appeal, but he couldn't ignore the emptiness he felt. It was food for the sake of food, without the soul that had made Carter's Bistro special. "We're not like them," Jack finally said, "and we don't need to be." Maria smiled, relieved. "Exactly. We just need to remind people of what we have here. The warmth, the community, the food that's made with care and love. Over the next few weeks, Jack and Maria began to strategize. They didn't want to mimic the Golden Fork. They had no interest in becoming another cookie-cutter, trend-chasing restaurant. Instead, they focused on what they did best, creating authentic experiences for their guests. Jack decided it was time to push their brand forward in a way that felt true to them. They started hosting behind-the-scenes nights at Carter's Bistro, where guests could tour the kitchen, meet the chefs, and learn more about the sourcing of their ingredients. They also began offering a limited-time chef's table experience, where Jack himself would cook a multi-course meal for a small group, sharing stories of the restaurant's history and philosophy along the way. It wasn't about competing with the Golden Fork. It was about leaning into what made Carter's Bistro different. It was about building a deeper connection with the people who truly valued what the restaurant represented. The response was immediate. The nights quickly sold out, and guests began to appreciate the personal touch Jack had reintroduced to the restaurant. Slowly, the buzz around Carter's Bistro started to grow once again. As Jack stood at the front of the restaurant one night, welcoming guests to another sold-out chef's table event, he realized something important. The rivalry with the Golden Fork wasn't a battle he had to win. It was a reminder that his success didn't lie in trends or in outshining the competition. It lay in staying true to who he was and the values that made Carter's Bistro unique. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Jack's restaurant may be facing fierce competition, but it's clear that authenticity is what sets Carter's Bistro apart. What do you think? How can a restaurant stay true to itself in a world full of trends? The months of navigating the challenges of a rising competitor had taken their toll on Jack. While Carter's Bistro had regained some of its momentum through authentic experiences, the constant pressure to stay relevant weighed heavily on him. He had managed to keep the kitchen running smoothly, the staff energized, and the customers loyal. But there was something he hadn't counted on: an internal pressure, the kind that crept up quietly and made itself known in moments of silence. It was the constant balancing act of maintaining the integrity of the restaurant while keeping up with the outside world's expectations. Jack had always prided himself on being the face of Carter's Bistro, overseeing the kitchen, curating the menu, and staying personally involved in the operations. But now, the cracks were starting to show. One evening, after the last of the dinner rush had died down, Jack found himself alone in the kitchen, staring at the stainless steel counters. The dim light above him cast long shadows, and the usual buzz of activity had faded. Maria had already gone home, and the rest of the team was cleaning up. Jack leaned against the counter, rubbing his eyes in exhaustion. The door to the kitchen opened, and a voice broke through the silence. It was Emily, one of the line cooks. She stood in the doorway, hesitant, her eyes filled with concern. "Chef," she said softly, "can I talk to you for a minute?" Jack looked up, surprised. Emily was usually a quiet, hard-working presence in the kitchen. She was also one of the youngest members of the team, still finding her place in the fast-paced environment of a top-tier kitchen. "Of course," Jack said, pushing himself off the counter and motioning toward the break room. "Let's talk." They walked into the break room, and Jack could see the weight on Emily's shoulders. She sat down across from him, wringing her hands nervously. "I've noticed you've been working a lot more lately," Emily began. "You've been pushing yourself harder, and the stress is starting to show." Jack sighed, leaning back in his chair. He hadn't realized how obvious it had become. "I'm just trying to keep everything together. We've been through a lot with the Golden Fork opening, and it feels like we have to constantly stay ahead." Emily nodded. "I get that, but you don't have to do it all alone. We're a team, chef. You can lean on us. You've always said we're like a family here." Jack ran a hand through his hair, feeling a pang of guilt. He had always prided himself on being a hands-on leader, but lately, he'd been spreading himself too thin. The stress had built up, and it had begun to affect his decisions, his mood, and his ability to connect with the team the way he used to. "I know," Jack said, his voice softer. "I guess I've been trying to prove something to myself. After everything with the Golden Fork, I wanted to show that we could stand on our own." Emily smiled gently. "You don't have to prove anything, chef. We all believe in what we're doing here. You've already built something incredible. We're with you, every step of the way." Her words hit harder than Jack had expected. He had been so focused on proving himself to the outside world that he had forgotten to check in with the people who had always believed in him, the team that had stood by him from the very beginning. The following morning, Jack woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He had realized something important the night before. He wasn't alone in this. His team had always been there, and it was time he started leaning on them more, not just as workers, but as partners in the journey. He began making small changes right away. Instead of being in the kitchen all day, he delegated more responsibilities to Maria, Emily, and the rest of the team. He started taking regular breaks, stepping outside the kitchen to engage with customers, and reconnected with his staff in ways he hadn't in months. Maria was the first to notice the shift. One morning, she walked into the kitchen to find Jack not only present, but also actively involved in the prep work, getting his hands dirty just like the rest of them. He was asking questions, making suggestions, and actually listening to the team's input. "You're back," Maria said with a grin, handing him a knife. Jack laughed. "Yeah, I guess I was gone for a little while, but I'm back now. I'm here for all of you." Later that week, Jack decided it was time to address the bigger issue: his competition with the golden fork. It had been an ever-present thorn in his side, but he had realized that obsessing over it was only distracting him from what mattered most. It was time to set aside the rivalry and focus on what Carter's Bistro could truly offer. The team gathered for a meeting, and Jack stood before them, taking a deep breath. "I know we've been facing some serious competition lately," he began, "but I've realized something. We can't keep measuring ourselves against the golden fork or anyone else. We're not here to be the next big trend. We're here to create something real, something lasting." He paused, making eye contact with each of his team members. "And I need all of you to help me get back to what we do best, focusing on the food, the people, and the experiences we create. We've been through a lot, but I know we can make Carter's Bistro even better than it was before. It's time we take the next step together." The room was silent for a moment, and then Maria stood up, followed by the rest of the team. They clapped and cheered, and Jack could feel the weight lifting from his shoulders. They were with him. They had always been with him, and now they were ready to move forward. As the days passed, Carter's Bistro started to feel like it had a renewed sense of purpose. The stress that had once clouded Jack's judgment began to fade, replaced by a clearer vision. The team was more energized, working together in ways that felt natural, as though the restaurant had regained its heartbeat. Jack knew there was still a long road ahead. The restaurant world was never without its challenges. But with his team by his side, he felt more confident than ever that Carter's Bistro would not only survive, it would thrive. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Jack's decision to lean on his team was a turning point in his journey. Do you think it's important to share the burden of leadership, or should a leader always stand alone? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. As the days went on, Jack began to feel the rhythm of Carter's Bistro returning. The kitchen was humming with energy, and the atmosphere had shifted from one of quiet tension to one of focused optimism. The team was united, and the customers could feel it too. The reservations were picking up again, the reviews were starting to turn in their favor, and the buzz about the chef's table experiences had spread like wildfire. One evening, as the dinner rush was beginning to wind down, Jack stood in the back of the restaurant, watching the dining room. He was proud of what Carter's Bistro had become: resilient, grounded, and most importantly, real. There was no pretending to be something they weren't. Jack had learned that lesson the hard way over the last few months. But what he didn't expect was that this sense of stability would be about to be shaken once again. This time, by an unexpected guest. It started with the buzz around the kitchen. "Did you hear? There's a big party coming in tonight," Maria called out to Jack as she prepped the dishes for the night service. "The reservations under Trump." "Like, the Trump?" Jack froze for a moment. He had heard of the name. Of course he had. But there was no way it could be him. "The Trump? Are you sure?" Jack asked, leaning over the counter to peer at the reservation book. Maria nodded, glancing up at him with a look of both disbelief and curiosity. "It's him, chef. It says Donald Trump on the reservation. A table for 6. We're supposed to treat it as VIP." Jack's mind raced. There was no way he could ignore the potential storm this could stir up. The media frenzy, the controversy. What would it mean for Carter's Bistro? Okay, let's play it cool, Jack said, his voice steady, though inside, his heart was pounding. We'll treat him like any other guest, just like we would anyone else. No special treatment. As the evening approached, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. He wasn't sure if it was excitement or dread, but he knew this night would be different. When the front door opened and a group of people walked in, Jack felt a sudden tension in the air. And there he was. Donald Trump, surrounded by his entourage, stepped into Carter's Bistro. His unmistakable presence filled the room, even though he didn't have to say a word. There was something magnetic about the man, something larger than life. He wasn't just any celebrity. He was a former president, a businessman, and a figure whose name carried weight, whether good or bad. Jack immediately walked over, his posture straight and his mind clear. This was his restaurant, his domain, and he would not let anything, or anyone, throw him off course. Mr. Trump, welcome to Carter's Bistro, Jack said, offering his hand with a polite smile. It's an honor to have you here tonight. Trump extended his hand, a firm handshake, but he barely made eye contact. He was already scanning the room, his entourage following him like a parade. Thank you, Trump said with his signature confidence. I've heard good things about this place. I'm expecting great things. The tone was unmistakable. It wasn't arrogance, but there was an air of expectation, of someone who had always gotten what he wanted. Jack nodded, keeping his calm. Absolutely, Jack replied, forcing a smile. We'll do our best to make your evening unforgettable. As the night unfolded, Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. The restaurant had gone from a quiet neighborhood gym to an international headline in a matter of minutes. Word had spread that Trump was dining at Carter's Bistro, and soon, people outside the restaurant began to gather, phones in hand, hoping to catch a glimpse of the former president. Jack kept his distance from the table, focusing on running the kitchen and ensuring everything was perfect. The staff, though clearly nervous, followed his lead. Everyone worked with precision, even though the tension was palpable. Jack knew that this night would not be like any other. But the real test came when it was time for dessert. As the final course was cleared away, Jack found himself standing near the VIP table once again. He'd asked Maria to handle the desserts, but he wanted to personally check on the table one last time. Is everything to your liking, Mr. Trump? Jack asked, his voice steady as he approached the table. Trump glanced up at him briefly, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he raised his hand and waved it dismissively. Actually, he said, the food has been good, but I don't think you quite understand what I wanted. I need something more. Something with more flair. This is all fine, but it's not great. You need to be bold. You're not standing out enough. Jack was taken aback. He had prided himself on the authenticity and quality of his food. He wasn't about to compromise on that for anyone, not even for a former president. I understand, Jack said calmly, his eyes narrowing slightly. But at Carter's Bistro, we focus on quality and authenticity. We don't believe in showing off just for the sake of flair. Our dishes speak for themselves. Trump didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked over at his entourage, nodding as if approving of Jack's words. But then, he turned his gaze back to Jack, the faintest smirk on his face. You've got guts. I'll give you that, Trump said. But if you want to go far, you'll need to learn how to please everyone, not just the ones who already like you. Jack felt a surge of something, pride, defiance, maybe even frustration. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going to back down. The evening ended without any major drama, but Jack knew the experience had changed something. He had stood his ground, but the interaction with Trump had opened up a new level of scrutiny for the restaurant. The next day, headlines splashed across news outlets, proclaiming that Carter's Bistro had served Donald Trump. Some hailed the restaurant's boldness, while others critiqued the exchange, questioning whether Jack had been too defiant. Back in the kitchen, Maria approached Jack, her face full of curiosity. Chef, do you think we did the right thing? She asked. Jack exhaled deeply, glancing over at the team. I do. We stayed true to who we are, Maria. We didn't compromise. And that's the most important thing. No matter who walks through that door, will always be Carter's Bistro. The next few days were a whirlwind. The media continued to cover the visit, with varying opinions about Jack's interaction with Trump. Some praised his professionalism, others questioned his refusal to cater to Trump's expectations. But in the end, Jack realized one crucial thing. He had maintained his integrity, and Carter's Bistro had only grown stronger because of it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Jack's decision to stand firm in the face of pressure is a reminder of the importance of staying true to your values. But what do you think? Was Jack right to turn down Trump's request for something more, or should he have given in to make a better impression? Let us know in the comments below. The days after the Trump incident were a whirlwind for Jack. The media buzzed about the encounter, and opinions about Carter's Bistro spread far and wide. Some hailed him as a hero, a chef who refused to be swayed by a celebrity's influence. Others, particularly food critics and industry professionals, scrutinized his refusal to cater to a high-profile guest. For the first time in a long while, Jack found himself questioning whether he had made the right decision. But as the dust settled, a new problem emerged. The fallout from the evening was more than just media buzz. It was beginning to affect business. The restaurant had always relied on a steady stream of regulars, but now there were whispers, both negative and positive, floating through the local community. Some people were flocking to Carter's Bistro out of curiosity, eager to see the restaurant where the infamous Trump dinner had taken place. Others, however, viewed Jack's defiance as a sign of arrogance, an attitude that could turn away potential customers. The first real sign of trouble came when Maria pulled Jack aside during a slow afternoon. The lunch crowd had been smaller than usual, and the kitchen was unusually quiet. "Chef, we've got a problem," Maria said, her voice tinged with concern. Jack raised an eyebrow, stepping away from the prep station. "What's going on?" "Some of the regulars, people who've been coming here for years, they've started questioning our attitude. They feel like we've become too big for our britches. Like we're not the same place they fell in love with." Jack's stomach tightened. He had always thought of his regulars as family, people who understood and appreciated the heart of what Carter's Bistro was about. To hear that they felt alienated was unsettling. "I didn't mean to change things," Jack said quietly, "but I can't let us become something we're not just to please people." Maria nodded, understanding. "I know, Chef, but we've got to find a way to bring back that balance. We don't want to lose the heart of what we built here." Jack spent the next few days thinking about what Maria had said. It was clear that while his stance with Trump had solidified his sense of self and the integrity of the restaurant, it had also alienated certain segments of his loyal customer base. He knew he needed to address this, but he wasn't sure how. He couldn't apologize for staying true to his principles, but he needed to find a way to reassure his customers that Carter's Bistro hadn't changed. The solution came unexpectedly, one evening while Jack was taking a break in the back office. He received a call from an old friend, Sarah, a food critic he had known for years. "Jack, I've been hearing a lot of chatter about your place," Sarah said, her tone light but serious. "Seems like you've become a bit of a hot topic." Jack chuckled nervously. "That's one way to put it." "I know you're not one to back down from a challenge," Sarah said, her voice warm. "But the question is, do you want to keep the momentum going? Because if you do, you need to take control of the narrative." Jack leaned back in his chair, staring out the window. "What do you mean?" Sarah paused, then offered her suggestion. "Host an event. A special night where you invite some of your regulars, and even some of the people who've been talking about the Trump situation. Bring them back into the fold. Show them that Carter's Bistro is still their place. Remind them why they fell in love with it in the first place." Jack sat up, the idea taking shape in his mind. It was a way to reconnect with his loyal customers, a way to show that the heart of the restaurant hadn't changed despite the media frenzy. The event would be a chance for Jack to reestablish the community aspect of Carter's Bistro, to remind everyone of what it had always been. A neighborhood gym, known for its authenticity and passion. "Thanks, Sarah," Jack said, feeling a surge of gratitude. "I think you've just given me the answer I needed." The next few days were a blur as Jack and his team worked together to plan the event. The idea was simple, a VIP night, but not for the elite. Instead, it would be for the regulars, the patrons who had supported the bistro from the very beginning. Jack wanted to bring them back, give them a reason to feel connected again. He planned a special tasting menu that highlighted the dishes that had made Carter's Bistro famous, the ones that were filled with soul and simplicity. There would be no media, no cameras, just the people who had shaped the restaurant's story. When the night finally arrived, the energy in the restaurant was different. It wasn't the buzz of a typical dinner rush, but a quiet anticipation that filled the air. The guests arrived, families, couples, friends who had eaten at Carter's Bistro for years, and the warmth of the familiar faces began to settle Jack's nerves. The evening was a success. Jack had handpicked the menu himself, showcasing the signature dishes that his customers loved. He moved through the dining room, checking in with each table, talking to his regulars, and thanking them for their continued support. The atmosphere was relaxed and genuine, the way it had always been. No one talked about the Trump incident. There was no need. This night was about the food, the relationships, and the shared experiences that had made Carter's Bistro a part of the community. Towards the end of the evening, Jack stood before the group and raised his glass. "I want to thank all of you for being here tonight," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "It's because of each of you that this place exists. We've been through a lot recently, but what matters is this. Carter's Bistro will always be a place for you. We're not changing who we are. We're just growing together." The room filled with applause, and Jack felt a sense of relief he hadn't known he needed. The people who had made Carter's Bistro a success in the first place were there, reminding him of why he had started this journey. And in that moment, Jack knew that no matter what the world outside said, he had found his way back home. The next day, the media continued to talk about Jack's restaurant. Some stories were critical, others praised his ability to stand firm in his values. But Jack didn't pay much attention to it anymore. He had learned that the opinions of strangers didn't define him or his business. What mattered most was the people who walked through the door every day, the ones who truly understood the heart of Carter's Bistro. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Jack's decision to take control of the narrative and reconnect with his customers shows how powerful community support can be. What do you think? How important is it for a restaurant to stay true to its roots? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The aftermath of the VIP event had brought a sense of stability back to Carter's Bistro. The regulars who attended had expressed their gratitude for Jack's genuine approach, and the community support gave the restaurant a renewed energy. Still, even with the positive feedback, Jack knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges. The media storm was far from over, and now, it was not just about keeping his loyal customers. It was about finding a way to move forward while staying true to himself. The next few weeks felt like a balancing act. The kitchen was running smoothly, but the pressure of public opinion weighed heavily on Jack's shoulders. Every decision he made was scrutinized, from the dishes on the menu to the way he interacted with customers. He could feel the eyes of both critics and fans watching his every move. And amidst it all, Jack was haunted by a question. Was it enough to stay true to my values? Or do I need to adapt to the world around me? One evening, as Jack was closing up after a particularly busy dinner service, Maria entered the office, looking serious. She had a folder in her hand, something Jack had seen her bring in only when she had news that needed immediate attention. "Chef, we need to talk," she said, her voice grave. Jack straightened in his chair, concern creeping into his chest. "What's going on?" Maria sat down across from him, setting the folder on the desk. "It's the critics. We're getting some really mixed reviews. Some are still focused on the whole Trump thing, and others are saying the menu hasn't evolved enough. There's pressure for us to make some changes if we want to stay relevant." Jack ran a hand through his hair. "I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't think it would hit this hard." Maria nodded. "You've built something real here, chef. Something authentic. But authenticity isn't always what people want, especially in a world where trends change so quickly. You can't just sit back and let it happen. You've got to make decisions. And some of them might be hard." Jack thought about Maria's words long into the night. It was clear that the pressure was mounting. Carter's Bistro had become something bigger than just a restaurant. It was now a symbol of Jack's ideals, his defiance against the easy path. But could he keep that defiance alive, while also staying afloat in an industry that demanded constant reinvention? As the days passed, Jack began to feel the weight of those decisions. There were emails from investors, messages from old friends offering advice, and even some from critics suggesting that he needed to modernize the menu or update the interior to make it more appealing to younger crowds. Jack was torn. He knew that he couldn't compromise on his culinary philosophy, but at the same time, he didn't want to alienate the very people who had supported him all along. Then, one afternoon, as Jack was inspecting the dining room, his phone buzzed with a new email. He glanced at the screen. Another food critic, this time from a major culinary magazine, had sent a message requesting an interview. Jack's heart sank. It was the kind of attention he had once hoped for, but now it felt like more pressure than he was ready for. The email read, "We're interested in doing a feature on Carter's Bistro and its unique approach to food, especially considering the recent controversy surrounding your refusal to cater to a high-profile guest. We would love to hear your side of the story." Jack stared at the screen, debating. On one hand, this was an opportunity to share his vision with a wider audience. On the other hand, it felt like an invitation to rehash a moment that was already starting to fade from public attention. What if this revived the whole Trump incident again? What if it reignited the flames of division and criticism? He thought about it for hours, pacing around the kitchen, his mind buzzing with questions. Finally, he made a decision. He would do the interview, but on his terms. If this was going to bring attention to Carter's Bistro, he would use it as an opportunity to reaffirm what the restaurant stood for: quality, authenticity, and community. It wasn't about the drama. It was about the food, and it always had been. A few days later, the food critic arrived at the bistro, notebook in hand and camera crew in tow. Jack greeted them with a firm handshake, offering his best smile despite the tightness in his chest. "I'm glad to see you here," Jack said, leading the critic and her team through the kitchen. "This place has always been about the food. It's about how we make people feel, not just about what's on the plate." The critic, a woman named Claire, looked around with a sharp eye. "I can tell. It's clear that there's passion in every detail, chef. But tell me, how do you handle the pressure to conform to industry trends? People want more. They want flashier presentations, bigger names, more pizzazz. How do you stay true to what Carter's Bistro is?" Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself. He had been asked this question a dozen times by now, but answering it aloud felt like a weight lifting off his shoulders. "I don't think it's about trends. It's about the integrity of the food. I'm not in this business to be the loudest, the flashiest, or the most famous. I'm here because I want to make food that tells a story, food that makes people feel something. If we start chasing trends or trying to please the loudest voices, we lose what makes us who we are." Claire nodded thoughtfully. "And what about the controversy with the Trump dinner? How does that factor into the story of Carter's Bistro?" Jack's eyes locked with hers. That night was a moment, sure, but it wasn't what defines us. What defines us is the community we've built, the meals we've shared, and the authenticity we've maintained. I'm not here to cater to celebrities or anyone else. I'm here for the people who appreciate what we do. If that means saying no when I need to, then so be it." As the interview wrapped up, Jack felt a sense of relief. It hadn't been easy, but he had stuck to his guns. He had spoken from the heart, and he hoped that would resonate with the people who mattered. Later that night, as Jack sat in the quiet restaurant, reflecting on the day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path forward wasn't going to be easy, but it was clear that as long as he stayed true to his core values, Carter's Bistro would continue to thrive. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Jack's decision to stay true to his vision, even under pressure, is a powerful reminder that success doesn't come from chasing trends. It comes from authenticity. What do you think? How important is it to stay true to your values in a world that constantly changes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The interview with Claire, the food critic, had aired a week after the taping. To Jack's surprise, the piece wasn't the sensationalized coverage he had feared. Instead, Claire focused on the heart of the restaurant, emphasizing Jack's commitment to authenticity, his unique culinary vision, and the spirit of Carter's Bistro. It was a far cry from the drama-filled headlines Jack had become accustomed to. The feature brought new eyes to the restaurant, an influx of curious patrons who wanted to experience the bistro for themselves. But with this new attention came a different kind of pressure. The audience wasn't just coming for the food. They were coming to see if the restaurant lived up to the story Claire had told. Jack was determined to show them that it did. But the challenge now was to keep up with the expectations that came with it. One particularly busy Friday night, Jack stood at the front of the kitchen, surveying the chaos. It was a typical rush hour. The clatter of pans, the hum of the stove, the sizzle of dishes being plated. But something was different now. The energy felt heavier. Jack was aware that people weren't just there for dinner. They were there because of the story. Maria came up to him, a plate of freshly prepared appetizers in hand. "How's it going, chef? We're in the weeds tonight." Jack wiped his forehead, his mind already racing ahead. "Yeah, but we've got this. Just keep the team focused, Maria. We're here for the people." She gave him a knowing look, nodding. "The critics, the spotlight, they don't matter. We've got to keep it real. You've been telling us that from day one." Jack smiled, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always believed that authenticity was the key to his success. Now, it was more than just a philosophy. It was the foundation upon which Carter's Bistro had been built. As the night wore on, the restaurant buzzed with a new energy. More than a few patrons had arrived, taking photos, trying to catch a glimpse of the chef who had made headlines. Jack didn't mind. He knew that people would always be curious about the drama, the controversy. But he also knew that once they tasted the food, they'd realize that the heart of Carter's Bistro was still the same. Around midnight, as the last plates were cleared from the tables, Jack walked through the dining room, checking in with the remaining customers. He didn't have to say much. A simple smile and a thank you went a long way. People wanted to feel seen, appreciated, and for the first time in a long time, Jack felt as though his customers understood that Carter's Bistro was more than just a place to eat. It was a place to experience. The next morning, after a much-needed rest, Jack sat down at his office desk, staring at the blank page in front of him. He had been offered opportunities before, interviews, cooking events, partnerships, but now, the landscape was different. People wanted to know more about Jack, about Carter's Bistro, about what made it tick. He could feel the pressure mounting, but this time, he didn't feel paralyzed by it. The path forward seemed clearer now than it ever had before. Maria knocked on the door, entering with a coffee in hand. "Thought you could use this," she said, setting the cup down in front of him. Jack smiled, grateful for her presence. "Thanks, Maria. I've been thinking about the future, about where we go from here." Maria leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "What are you thinking?" Jack paused, weighing his thoughts carefully. "I think it's time to start taking the next step, expanding, maybe opening another location. But I want to make sure we do it right. I want to maintain what makes this place special, no matter where we go." Maria raised an eyebrow. "Expansion? You've been saying for years that Carter's Bistro is a one-location kind of place." Jack nodded. "I've always believed in that. But things are changing, and I can't deny that the interest is there. It's just a matter of finding the right balance." Maria was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What about your principles, chef? How do we make sure we don't lose that authenticity, that integrity?" Jack smiled, leaning back in his chair. "That's the key. We don't expand to become a chain. We expand because we want to share what we've built here with more people. We make sure every new location feels like the heart of Carter's Bistro. If we can do that, then it won't matter how big we get." In the days that followed, Jack and Maria began discussing the possibility of expansion more seriously. They spent hours in meetings, sketching out plans, considering locations, and brainstorming ideas for maintaining the unique feel of Carter's Bistro. They knew it would be a delicate process, one that required attention to detail and a deep commitment to the values that had made the restaurant a success in the first place. But Jack also realized that he couldn't do it alone. Carter's Bistro had always been a team effort, from the kitchen staff to the front-of-house crew. And now, more than ever, Jack needed the people around him to help carry the vision forward. One evening, as Jack was closing up after another busy service, he called a staff meeting. The team gathered in the small back room, some sitting on crates, others standing, the weight of the moment palpable in the air. "All right, everyone," Jack began, his voice steady. "I've been thinking a lot about the future of Carter's Bistro. We've been through a lot this year, but I think it's time to take the next step. We've had people asking about expanding, about bringing what we do here to new places, and I think it's something we need to seriously consider." There was a murmur of excitement among the staff. It was clear they hadn't expected this kind of announcement. Maria spoke up. But we're not going to just expand for the sake of it. We're going to do it in a way that keeps our integrity intact. Every new place we open will have the same soul that's made Carter's Bistro what it is. Jack nodded. Exactly. And I can't do this without all of you. This isn't just my vision. It's ours. Every one of you has contributed to making this place what it is, and I need your help to bring it to the next level. The team exchanged glances, and Jack could see the excitement building in their eyes. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem so uncertain. It felt like the beginning of something new, something bigger than just one restaurant. It was the birth of a movement, one that was centered on values, authenticity, and community. As Jack sat back and listened to the discussions that followed, he felt a sense of peace settle in. No matter how much the world outside changed, Carter's Bistro would always be a place where people came together, shared meals, and built lasting memories. And now, with the future looking brighter than ever, Jack knew that the journey was far from over. This was just the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Jack's journey is just starting, and there's so much more to come. What do you think about his plans to expand? Do you think it's possible to grow while keeping true to what made the restaurant special? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. As the decision to expand Carter's Bistro began to take shape, Jack couldn't ignore the wave of excitement and anxiety that washed over him. The restaurant had always been a small, intimate space, one where every dish was crafted with care, where the rhythm of the kitchen and the chatter of the dining room formed the pulse of the bistro. But now, as he considered the future, he realized that the essence of Carter's Bistro had never been the building. It had always been the people, the passion, and the philosophy behind the food. Jack and Maria spent the next few weeks scouting potential locations for the first expansion. They wanted a place that could mirror the energy and warmth of their original spot, a place that could embody the values of authenticity, community, and integrity that they had fought so hard to maintain. One Tuesday afternoon, as Jack drove around a bustling downtown neighborhood, he found a location that felt promising. The building was tucked between a handful of trendy cafes and boutiques, its brick exterior worn but full of character. It wasn't flashy, and it didn't scream luxury, but it had potential. A sign outside read, "For lease," and Jack felt a surge of possibility. He called Maria, his voice filled with excitement. "I think I found it. It's not much, but it's got the kind of vibe we want. It's cozy, it's got character, and it's in a place that feels like it could be a real home for us." Maria's voice crackled through the phone, an undercurrent of cautious optimism. "You think it's the right fit?" Jack parked in front of the building, looking it over once more. "It feels right. We'll know for sure when we walk inside." Later that afternoon, Jack and Maria met at the location, both of them surveying the empty space. The walls, though bare, felt full of potential. The high ceilings, the large windows that would allow natural light to flood the room, and the exposed brick offered a rustic charm that could easily be transformed into a warm, welcoming environment. "This could work," Maria said, running her hand along one of the walls. "It's got the bones of something great. We could really make it our own." Jack nodded. "It's going to need work, but that's part of the fun. This place has character, and I think people will appreciate that. They'll know it's authentic." The next few months were a whirlwind of decisions and changes. Jack and Maria worked tirelessly on the design, making sure every detail matched the spirit of Carter's Bistro. They found local artists to help with the decor, a mix of modern touches and vintage pieces that gave the space a cozy, familiar feel. They sourced new equipment, reorganized their kitchen flow, and made sure that the new staff was trained in the same way that had made the original bistro such a success. Despite the chaos, Jack felt a sense of calm. He had always been a hands-on leader, and this expansion was no different. Every decision, from the selection of the paint colors to the sourcing of local ingredients, was a reflection of his belief that Carter's Bistro wasn't just a place to eat. It was an experience. On opening day, Jack stood at the front of the restaurant, anxiously watching as people began to trickle in. The dining room, filled with the familiar hum of conversations and the clink of silverware, felt alive in a way Jack hadn't anticipated. The nervous energy was palpable, but so was the excitement. This was it, This was the moment he had worked so hard for. Maria walked up beside him, her eyes scanning the room. "It looks amazing, chef. You did it." Jack smiled, but the anxiety in his chest remained. "It's just the beginning, Maria. We need to prove ourselves here." As the night wore on, the restaurant filled with the laughter and chatter of customers. The food flowed from the kitchen, dishes filled with the same passion and attention to detail that had made the original bistro a success. Jack moved between the kitchen and the dining room, checking in with his team, making sure everything was running smoothly. By the time the evening settled into a quieter lull, Jack stood at the bar, watching the last few guests enjoy their meals. There was a moment of quiet reflection. He had done it. Carter's Bistro had officially expanded. "Everything okay?" Maria asked, appearing beside him. Jack turned to her, a look of quiet satisfaction on his face. "Yeah, it's more than okay. It feels right." Maria smiled. "I think we've got something here, chef." The next few weeks passed in a blur. The new location quickly gained a loyal following, and with each passing day, Jack's confidence in the expansion grew. The reviews, while still mixed, were starting to reflect what he had hoped for. People loved the food, they loved the atmosphere, and they loved that it felt like the same Carter's Bistro they had come to know and love. But Jack knew that expansion wasn't just about the physical space. It was about maintaining the soul of Carter's Bistro, and that meant he had to remain vigilant. He couldn't let success go to his head. He couldn't lose sight of why he started this journey in the first place. One evening, after a particularly challenging service, Jack sat down with Maria at the bar. The place was winding down, the staff cleaning up after a long night. Jack took a deep breath and looked around. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "this place, it's a lot more than I thought it would be. It's not just about the food. It's about what we're building here. It's the people who come in. It's the connections we're making. It's all of it." Maria nodded, wiping down the counter. "Yeah, and we can't forget that. We built something special here, chef. Just because we've got a bigger space doesn't mean we're changing the foundation." Jack smiled, leaning back in his chair. "I'm not worried about that. We've got a strong foundation. I think we're just getting started." As Jack looked around at the bustling dining room and the smiling faces of his team, he realized that the journey had come full circle. What had started as a small bistro with a few dedicated employees had now turned into a thriving, expanding business, but it was still grounded in the same principles that had always driven him: authenticity, quality, and community. No matter where Carter's Bistro went, no matter how many locations they opened, Jack knew that the heart of the restaurant would remain the same. And as long as he held on to that, he could face whatever challenges came his way. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Jack's expansion journey is a reminder that success isn't about changing who you are. It's about staying true to yourself while embracing new opportunities. What do you think about his vision for the future? Can Carter's Bistro stay authentic as it grows? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Months passed, and Carter's Bistro continued to thrive. The new location had found its footing, with regular customers and rave reviews coming in from food critics and bloggers alike. The staff had settled into a routine, and Jack's vision for the expansion seemed to be slowly becoming a reality. Yet, with success came challenges that Jack hadn't fully anticipated. As the bistro gained more recognition, so did the pressure to maintain the momentum. The restaurant industry, with its fickle tastes and unpredictable demands, was not an easy world to navigate, and Jack found himself facing the growing expectation that he should keep Carter's Bistro on top at all costs. One morning, Jack sat in his office, sipping his coffee as he flipped through a stack of contracts and business proposals. One of them caught his eye, a partnership proposal with a well-known chain of organic food suppliers. It promised discounts, exclusive ingredients, and a larger distribution network. The numbers were appealing, and the thought of scaling up even faster was tempting. But something about it didn't sit right with Jack. Later that day, Maria knocked on the door, her expression serious. "You seen this?" She handed Jack a food critic's review from a popular online magazine. The headline read, "Carter's Bistro faces its biggest test yet. Can it stay authentic amidst expansion?" Jack scanned the article, his eyes narrowing as he read. The critic praised the food, but pointed out that the growing size of the bistro and the increase in its popularity might cause it to lose the personal touch that had originally made it special. The critic warned that expansion was a dangerous game, one that could turn the bistro into just another chain of restaurants, stripped of its heart and soul. "Looks like we're getting some unwanted attention," Jack muttered, throwing the review aside. "People are starting to question if we can stay true to who we are." Maria crossed her arms, clearly concerned. "It's not like we don't know what we're up against, but if we start chasing after partnerships like this one, we might end up losing sight of what we stand for." Jack sat back, his mind racing. The partnership with the chain supplier was a tempting offer. More ingredients, better pricing, and the promise of faster growth. It would make Carter's Bistro more efficient, more profitable. But at what cost? That evening, as Jack prepared for another busy service, he found himself questioning everything. The expansion had been thrilling, but it was also more complicated than he had imagined. He had always believed in staying small, keeping things personal, but now, as the restaurant gained popularity, he was faced with new temptations, partnerships, sponsorships, and offers that seemed to promise an easier path forward. Yet, Jack knew that chasing after quick success could easily compromise the very essence of Carter's Bistro. The service that night was intense. The kitchen was packed with orders, and the front-of-house staff was running around trying to keep up with the growing demand. Jack moved between the kitchen and the dining room, checking in on the team, ensuring the food was up to his standards. As the night wore on, Jack couldn't shake the nagging feeling in his gut. Just before closing, Jack called a meeting in the back of the restaurant. The kitchen crew, the front-of-house staff, and Maria gathered around him, the hum of the night's chaos still buzzing in the air. "We've been getting a lot of attention lately," Jack began, his voice steady. "Some of it's good, some of it's not. There's been talk about us getting too big, about losing our authenticity. But we've always built this place on one thing, staying true to what we believe in. And that's what we're going to do moving forward." Maria spoke up. "What about these offers, chef? The suppliers, the sponsorships? Are we going to take any of them?" Jack took a deep breath. "We've got some decisions to make. These offers are tempting, but I don't want to make a deal that changes what we do here. We can't let anyone else define who we are. This restaurant was built on authenticity, and that's something we can't compromise." The room was quiet, the staff looking to Jack for reassurance. Jack met their eyes, the weight of his decision hanging in the air. "We're not just serving food here. We're creating something real, something people can connect with. And that's something no partnership, no sponsorship, can take away from us." In the days that followed, Jack turned down the partnership offer, much to the surprise of some of his business contacts. He also made a decision to pull back on some of the expansion plans that had been discussed. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of moving parts, and the business world was full of temptations. But Jack knew that staying true to his vision and keeping Carter's Bistro grounded in the values that had made it successful was the right path forward. He focused on improving the dining experience, offering new seasonal menus, and staying connected with his loyal customers. The bistro's success had always been about more than just the food. It was about the community they had built, the relationships they had formed, and the trust they had earned. One evening, just as the dinner rush started to calm down, Jack stood in the dining room, watching the happy faces of his customers as they enjoyed their meals. The soft chatter in the background, the clinking of glasses, the sound of laughter. It felt like home. This was the atmosphere that Jack had always envisioned for Carter's Bistro. The food was still the star, but the sense of community, of warmth, was what truly made it special. Maria walked up beside him, her eyes scanning the room. "Looks like we're doing all right." Jack nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle in his chest. "We are. But we've got to keep reminding ourselves of why we started this. The authenticity, the love for the craft, that's what will keep us going." Maria smiled. "I think you're right. And as long as we stay true to that, we'll be fine." That night, as Jack stood by the front door, thanking the last of the guests for coming, he reflected on how far Carter's Bistro had come. The bistro had faced its challenges, but Jack knew that the key to its future was not in chasing external validation or partnerships. It was in staying true to the values that had shaped it from the beginning. With the future uncertain but full of potential, Jack felt ready to face whatever came next. Because no matter how big Carter's Bistro grew, it would always be a place for authenticity, community, and most importantly, the people who believed in it from the very start. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Jack's journey reminds us that no matter how big we get, staying true to ourselves is always the most important thing. What's your take on Carter's Bistro's choices to stay authentic? Do you think authenticity matters in today's world of fast-paced business? Let us know in the comments below. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Jack thought he had everything under control. Carter's Bistro was now a success story that many in the restaurant industry admired. The second location had exceeded all expectations, and the loyal customer base seemed to be growing steadily. But with success came a new, less familiar challenge: competition. While Jack had been focusing on staying true to his roots, a new restaurant opened just a few blocks down the street, claiming to offer a similar style of cuisine, but with a modern twist. At first, Jack didn't think much of it. He had his own vision, and he didn't worry about what others were doing. However, the impact was undeniable. Within weeks, the new place, the Modern Bite, had started drawing in a crowd. Its sleek, minimalist design and innovative menu drew younger, trendier customers, and soon, there were whispers that it was quickly becoming the new hotspot in the neighborhood. Jack couldn't help but feel a slight sting. He knew Carter's Bistro was unique, built on authenticity, community, and love for great food. But he also knew that the restaurant world had a way of changing fast. The Modern Bite's opening had thrown him off balance, and soon, the tension was starting to show. One evening, as Jack was walking back to the office after dinner service, Maria caught up with him. Her expression was serious, and Jack immediately sensed that something was weighing on her. "Chef," she started, her voice cautious, "have you seen the numbers for the last few weeks? We've been seeing a drop in our reservations. The new place, it's pulling a lot of people away." Jack stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing. "I figured as much. But this isn't the end of the world. People come to us for the food, not just for the decor or the trendy vibe." Maria nodded, but there was concern in her eyes. "I know, but it's not just that. It's starting to affect the morale of the staff. People are worried, Jack." Jack sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. He had always prided himself on staying calm under pressure, but now, with this new challenge threatening everything they had built, he felt the weight of it all. Carter's Bistro had been a dream, a place where his passion for cooking and his desire to create something special had thrived. But now, he was faced with the reality that competition was inevitable, and it wasn't always fair. Later that night, Jack sat in his office, scrolling through the reviews of the Modern Bite. It was hard not to compare them to Carter's Bistro. The food looked amazing, innovative and bold, pushing the boundaries of traditional dishes. The interior design was sleek and modern, a stark contrast to the rustic, homey feel of Carter's Bistro. It was a place that attracted influencers, foodies, and young professionals, and the buzz surrounding it was palpable. He thought back to the initial days of Carter's Bistro, the small, intimate space, the focus on authenticity, the connections he had built with his customers and staff. None of that had changed, but Jack realized that the restaurant world was moving in a different direction. It wasn't enough to just offer great food anymore. There were new expectations, the latest trends, social media buzz, and constant reinvention. The next morning, as Jack sat down to meet with his team, he knew this meeting would be different. They needed to address the challenge head-on. "All right," Jack began, his tone serious but calm. "We've been in business for a while now, and we've built something incredible. But the restaurant world doesn't stand still. The Modern Bite is a real competitor, and we need to decide how we're going to respond." Maria stood beside him, nodding in agreement. "It's not just about the food. It's about how we market ourselves, how we make people feel when they walk through the door. We need to rethink our approach." Jack paused, taking in the faces of his team. They had been through a lot together, facing the challenges of expansion, keeping their values intact, and growing their customer base. But this felt different. The competition wasn't just about food. It was about relevance in a rapidly changing world. "We can't ignore what's happening," Jack continued, his voice steady. "But we also can't abandon who we are. We've always been about authenticity, community, and quality. If we lose that, we lose everything. The next few weeks were a blur of brainstorming sessions, late-night meetings, and a re-evaluation of everything Carter's Bistro stood for. The team was determined to respond strategically without compromising their identity. They didn't need to mimic the modern bite. They needed to enhance what made them unique. The first thing they decided to do was revamp the menu. They introduced seasonal dishes inspired by the local community, highlighting fresh ingredients from nearby farms. They also added a few bold new items, dishes that pushed the boundaries while still staying true to their roots. Jack worked closely with his chefs, ensuring that every new dish was a reflection of the restaurant's passion for food. Next, they began to focus on the experience. They introduced themed nights, Carter's Bistro Wine and Dine Tuesdays, where local winemakers came in to share their wines with customers, Community Fridays, where local musicians performed, turning the bistro into a lively hub for the neighborhood. They doubled down on their social media presence, sharing behind-the-scenes moments from the kitchen, showcasing the personalities of the staff, and highlighting the bistro's commitment to local farmers and producers. But Jack knew that the real secret wasn't just about offering something new. It was about making people feel connected. The essence of Carter's Bistro was the relationships they had with their customers, and that's what they needed to nurture. Then, something unexpected happened. One Friday evening, as the bistro filled with the hum of excited conversation and clinking glasses, a group of customers approached the bar. One of them, a regular, raised their glass to Jack. "You know," they said with a smile, "there's something special about this place. It's not just the food. It's the feeling we get when we walk in. We don't want the trendy stuff. We want what you've got. Real, authentic, and welcoming." Jack smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. In that moment, he realized that Carter's Bistro had something money couldn't buy: loyalty. The kind that wasn't swayed by trends or competition, but by the real connections they had made over the years. The next day, Jack received a call from one of the biggest influencers in the local food scene, someone who had recently dined at Carter's Bistro. They wanted to feature the restaurant in an upcoming video, praising its authenticity and the unique dining experience. It was the kind of exposure that could rival the buzz around the modern bite. Jack couldn't help but smile. Maybe this was the turning point. The storm had come, and they had weathered it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Carter's Bistro may have faced its biggest challenge yet, but it's not about following the trends. It's about staying true to yourself. What's the one thing you think makes a restaurant or business stand out from the competition? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The winds of competition had shifted, and Jack was beginning to feel the storm subside. The rebranding of Carter's Bistro had started to pay off. Their customer base was growing again, and there was a renewed sense of excitement around the bistro. But as the days passed, Jack realized that the path forward wouldn't be entirely smooth. The challenges of balancing authenticity with expansion were still present, and it was becoming more evident that Carter's Bistro would need more than just a new menu and a few events to maintain its position in the market. It needed something more lasting, more powerful, an identity that could set it apart in a way that no one could replicate. The breakthrough came one crisp autumn evening, when Jack received an unexpected call. It was from Anthony Myers, the owner of the Modern Bite. Jack had never met him before, but he had heard about him. Young, ambitious, and determined to create something fresh. The call took him completely by surprise. "Hey, Jack," Anthony's voice crackled through the phone. "It's Anthony from the Modern Bite. How's it going?" Jack blinked in confusion. Good. Good, I guess. What can I do for you?" Anthony chuckled lightly. "Look, I know things have been a little competitive between our places, but I think we both know the industry is bigger than any one restaurant. I wanted to talk to you about something." Jack was taken aback. For months, he'd viewed the Modern Bite as his main competitor, someone who was threatening to overshadow Carter's Bistro. The idea that Anthony might want to talk was disorienting. But, as always, Jack was open to hearing people out. "All right," Jack said cautiously. "What's on your mind?" "I think we've both realized something," Anthony continued, his voice serious now. "We're not exactly competing in the same space. Sure, we offer similar food, but our vibe, our target audience, it's different. You've got this incredible community-focused atmosphere, the authenticity. And we've got the sleek, trendy crowd looking for the next big thing. But there's a gap, Jack. A gap that I think we can fill together. Jack was silent for a moment, processing what Anthony was saying. You're suggesting we collaborate? Exactly, Anthony said, his voice picking up momentum. What if we teamed up? I'm not talking about merging or anything crazy, but a partnership of sorts, something where we can blend what we're both doing. You've got the local farmers, the deep community connections. We've got the innovation, the food science-driven approach. What if we could combine those things in a way that sets us both apart from the rest of the industry? Jack sat back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he considered the offer. The thought of working with his competitor was strange, even unsettling. But as Anthony spoke, Jack could see the potential. They both had something that the other needed, something that could elevate both their brands without losing their identities. Carter's Bistro had always been about authenticity and connection. The Modern Bite had always been about pushing boundaries and staying ahead of trends. But together, they could create something that neither of them could achieve on their own. What would this partnership look like? Jack asked, his voice cautiously intrigued. Anthony paused for a beat. Well, we could start small. Collaborate on a seasonal menu that features ingredients from both our restaurants. You know, local produce from your side, with a few creative twists from our kitchen. We could host joint events, maybe even a pop-up dinner. The key here is to leverage what each of us does best while staying true to who we are. Jack ran his hand through his hair. It's a bold idea, but what about our customers? Will they see this as a sellout move? Anthony's voice softened, almost as if he was reading Jack's mind. That's the thing. It's not about turning into something we're not. It's about showcasing the best of both worlds. And the customers, they'll see it. They'll see two restaurants, two different philosophies, coming together for something bigger than just competition. It's about respect. Respect for what you've built. Respect for what I've built. Jack took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision. This wasn't just about business. It was about redefining what competition meant. It wasn't about tearing each other down. It was about learning from each other, growing together, and creating something that could offer the best of both worlds. He'd always believed that the best things in life came from collaboration, not division. Maybe this was his chance to prove that. I'm in, Jack said, his voice steady. Anthony let out a breath of relief. I knew you'd get it, Jack. I really think this could be something special. In the weeks that followed, the two restaurants began to plan their collaboration. Jack and Anthony met regularly, discussing ideas for the new menu and event concepts. They even took a trip together to visit local farms and suppliers, strengthening their connection and ensuring that the ingredients they would use were of the highest quality. It wasn't long before the collaboration was ready to go public. The joint pop-up dinner, called A Taste of Two Worlds, was scheduled for a Thursday evening. It would feature dishes from both Carter's Bistro and the Modern Bite, with a special focus on sustainable, locally sourced ingredients. Tickets sold out within hours of the announcement, a testament to the excitement building around the collaboration. The night of the event arrived, and the energy in the restaurant was palpable. Customers, eager to try something new, filled the dining room. The menu featured a range of dishes, from Jack's signature farm-to-table options to Anthony's experimental fusion creations. There was a sense of curiosity in the air, as people awaited the unexpected combinations that would unfold before them. Jack stood near the kitchen, watching as the chefs worked seamlessly together, pulling off a delicate balance of flavors and innovation. For the first time in months, Jack felt a deep sense of pride, not just in his own work, but in what they were creating as a team. It wasn't just a collaboration between two restaurants. It was a testament to what could be achieved when people chose to embrace their differences and work together. As the evening drew to a close, Jack and Anthony stood in the corner of the dining room, quietly observing the satisfied guests. The buzz of conversation was louder than ever, and the atmosphere was electric. Jack couldn't help but smile. This was a moment that was bigger than either of them. You know, Jack said, his eyes gleaming, I never thought I'd say this, but I think this might be the beginning of something huge. Anthony grinned. I couldn't agree more. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Jack and Anthony's collaboration proves that when we work together instead of against each other, incredible things can happen. What's one thing you think could bring two competing businesses together for the greater good? Let us know in the comments below. The success of A Taste of Two Worlds was more than just a one-night event. It was the beginning of something much larger. Word about the collaboration between Carter's Bistro and the Modern Bites spread like wildfire, and soon enough, the two restaurants became the talk of the town. Social media was abuzz with posts, pictures, and rave reviews, and both Jack and Anthony were receiving messages of support from their customers, fellow chefs, and even critics. The idea that two competitors could come together and create something so unique had sparked something in the community. It wasn't just the food that people were talking about. It was the spirit of cooperation, the breaking down of boundaries, and the innovation that came from merging two distinct philosophies into one shared vision. As the weeks passed, Jack found himself facing new challenges. Though Carter's Bistro was now flourishing and benefiting from the buzz around the collaboration, there were unforeseen hurdles to navigate. The idea of merging authenticity with innovation had worked well for the pop-up dinner, but maintaining that balance long-term was proving difficult. Jack stood in the kitchen one morning, examining the new seasonal menu that had come out of the collaboration. It was exciting, yes, but also overwhelming. The dishes were bold, combining the best aspects of both Carter's Bistro and the Modern Bite. Yet Jack could feel the strain on the kitchen staff. Some of the new items required more complex techniques, which meant additional training and preparation. The customers were responding well to the changes, but it was starting to feel like the original essence of the restaurant. The simplicity, the comfort, was being pushed to the back burner. Maria noticed Jack's mood and approached him quietly. "You're thinking about the balance again, aren't you?" Jack sighed deeply, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, it's just, I want to give people something new, something exciting. But I don't want to lose what Carter's Bistro is all about. Its soul, its heart." Maria nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "It's a tightrope walk, but I think you've done a great job blending the old with the new. We can still push boundaries without losing who we are. It's just going to take time." The shift in the restaurant's dynamic wasn't just evident in the kitchen. It was also felt by the staff. Many of the younger employees, who had joined Carter's Bistro with a love for the traditional, farm-to-table approach, were now being asked to adapt to new techniques and ideas that came with working alongside Anthony's team. It wasn't easy for everyone, but the energy and excitement of the collaboration kept most of them motivated. One evening, as Jack was overseeing the dinner rush, he overheard a conversation between two of the younger servers. They were discussing how much they had learned from working with Anthony's chefs, who brought a more modern, technical approach to cooking. There was an undeniable buzz in the air, one that Jack couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the food that was evolving. The entire restaurant was changing, learning, and growing in ways he hadn't anticipated. The collaboration had also caught the attention of the local food critics. Carter's Bistro had always been praised for its cozy atmosphere and traditional dishes, but now, with the infusion of creativity and innovation from the Modern Bite, the bistro was becoming the subject of glowing reviews. Jack had always been skeptical about food critics, having seen how quickly their opinions could shift. But the consistent praise from both local and regional critics made him realize that this new direction could work, if they could find a way to preserve the core values of their restaurant. He sat in his office one evening, scrolling through the glowing review of Carter's Bistro that had just been published in a major food magazine. The critic had praised the way the restaurant had embraced both tradition and innovation, calling it the perfect balance of nostalgia and novelty. Jack felt a sense of pride, but also unease. The question still lingered in the back of his mind. Was he losing the heart of Carter's Bistro? It was during one of these late-night reflections that he received an unexpected call from Anthony. "Hey, Jack." Anthony's voice was upbeat, but there was a hint of something serious in his tone. "I've been thinking. The partnership between our restaurants, it's been incredible, right? But I think we can take it further. I've got an idea, and I want you to hear me out." Jack listened closely as Anthony outlined his vision for a larger-scale collaboration. Anthony was proposing that they open a shared space, a hybrid restaurant concept that combined the best elements of both Carter's Bistro and the Modern Bite. It would be a flagship location, one that embraced the idea of a farm-to-future dining experience, blending Jack's focus on locally sourced, fresh ingredients with Anthony's innovative culinary techniques. The idea was ambitious, but it was also a bold step forward. Jack was quiet for a moment. The idea of creating a new restaurant together was tempting. It could be the next phase of their journey, something that would redefine the dining experience in their city. But it also meant taking on a whole new level of risk, financially and creatively. "I don't know, Anthony," Jack said slowly. "It sounds incredible, but are we ready for something this big? Carter's Bistro is still my baby. I don't want to lose what we've built." Anthony's voice softened. "Jack, we wouldn't be losing anything. We're not starting over. We're evolving. And we're doing it together. This could be something that sets both of us apart, something no one else is doing. And we'd still have our individual spots, still stay true to what we do. But think about it. What if we could shape the future of food in a way no one's even imagined yet?" Jack's mind raced with possibilities. The vision was exciting, but it was also daunting. The idea of combining both restaurants into a single entity was risky, but if done right, it could revolutionize the way people thought about food, dining, and sustainability. The questions that had plagued him for weeks began to fade as he thought about the potential impact. After some careful consideration, Jack agreed to take the next steps with Anthony. They began planning the new venture, naming it Harvest and Innovation, a nod to both their roots and their commitment to pushing the boundaries of the culinary world. They spent months brainstorming, working with architects and designers, and selecting the perfect location. The goal was to create a space that felt like home, a place where tradition and innovation could coexist harmoniously. As the plans began to take shape, Jack realized something important. The challenge wasn't just about finding the right balance between food, design, and experience. It was about finding the courage to evolve without losing sight of what made Carter's Bistro and the Modern Bite special in the first place. Together, they were embarking on a new adventure, one that would test their limits, stretch their creativity, and ultimately redefine their places in the culinary world. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Harvest and Innovation is about to take the culinary world by storm, and we want you to be part of the journey. What's your favorite food fusion? Old meets new. Drop your thoughts below, and let's talk about how the future of food is being shaped today. As the construction of Harvest and Innovation progressed, Jack found himself balancing the excitement of the project with the familiar stresses of running Carter's Bistro. The prospect of launching a new, game-changing restaurant had reignited a fire in him, one that he hadn't felt in years. But the pressure was mounting, and every day seemed to bring a new challenge. There were permits to handle, contractors to oversee, and endless decisions to be made. Despite the constant whirlwind, Jack remained determined to make this new venture everything he and Anthony envisioned. Yet, there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind that wouldn't go away. As much as Carter's Bistro had grown and evolved, he couldn't help but wonder, was it enough? Was it time to say goodbye to the bistro and fully embrace the future with Harvest and Innovation? The idea of stepping away from a place that had been a part of him for so long was daunting, but Jack knew that sometimes growth required letting go of the past. One quiet afternoon, as Jack sat at the bar of Carter's Bistro, a familiar face walked through the door. It was Maria, the same Maria who had been with him through thick and thin since the early days of the restaurant. She had seen him at his lowest, at his most vulnerable, and had always been the steady hand to guide him back. She slid into the chair next to him, her smile warm as always. "Hey, Jack. How's everything going? You look like you could use a break." Jack chuckled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm just thinking. A lot going on right now with Harvest and Innovation, and I'm not sure if Carter's Bistro can keep up. It's hard to juggle both." Maria raised an eyebrow. "You're still thinking about Carter's Bistro? After all that's happened? You've created something amazing here, Jack." He stared into his drink, swirling it slowly. "I know, but it's not just about what I've created, Maria. It's about what comes next. I keep thinking, maybe it's time to take that step forward. But every time I think about leaving this place behind, I don't know. It's hard." Maria took a deep breath and looked Jack in the eye. "You've always said you want to leave a legacy, right? But a legacy isn't just about what you build. It's about what you do with it. You've already made a difference here. But what if Carter's Bistro and Harvest and Innovation could coexist? You don't have to choose between the past and the future, Jack. You just need to find the right balance. Jack leaned back in his chair, the weight of her words settling over him. Maria had a way of seeing things clearly when his own mind was clouded. The truth was, he didn't have to abandon Carter's Bistro to move forward. He could evolve without losing what had made it so special. Meanwhile, the modern bite was experiencing its own share of excitement and growing pains. Anthony had been just as immersed in the planning of harvest and innovation as Jack, but now, it was clear to both of them that they were nearing the point of no return. The space was almost complete, the interior design was being finalized, and the menu was coming together. The dream was about to become a reality. One evening, Jack and Anthony met at a local cafe, their usual spot to discuss progress. Anthony was buzzing with energy as usual, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. "Jack," he began, his voice uncharacteristically serious, "I've been thinking. This restaurant, it's not just about the food. It's about what we stand for, what we want the world to see when they walk through those doors." Jack leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Anthony paused for a moment, then spoke carefully. "What if harvest and innovation wasn't just a fusion of flavors, but a fusion of cultures? I'm not talking about just the food, but the people, the community. We could be a place that celebrates the diversity of our city, a place where different worlds collide, not just on the plate, but in the hearts of the people who come here." Jack thought about it for a moment. "So, we're talking about creating a space where people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, can come together over food. A place where culture and community take center stage?" Anthony nodded. "Exactly. We're both rooted in the community, but harvest and innovation could be a place that goes beyond just serving food. It could become a beacon for what's possible when we embrace the diversity around us." Jack had always believed that food had the power to bring people together, but hearing Anthony articulate this vision struck a chord deep within him. He'd never thought about the restaurant in this way, as a vehicle for social change and cultural celebration. It was powerful, and it was exactly the kind of project that could make a lasting impact. "Okay," Jack said after a long pause, "let's make it happen. Let's build something bigger than food. Let's build a movement." With their vision clear, Jack and Anthony threw themselves into the final stages of the project. The restaurant was set to open in just a few weeks, and both were determined to create an experience that would live up to the hype. The staff was being trained to embody the new philosophy, and the menu was being refined to reflect both the local flavors and the global influences that would define the space. They worked closely with local artists to design murals that would adorn the walls, each one telling a story about the city's diverse communities. The music playlist was curated to reflect different cultural traditions, and even the wine list was crafted to represent a wide range of regions, from the local vineyards to international selections. As the opening night drew closer, Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that was riding on this venture. But there was something different this time. The fear of failure had been replaced with a sense of purpose. He wasn't just opening a restaurant. He was opening a space for connection, for people to come together and celebrate what made them unique. The night before the grand opening, Jack sat alone in the restaurant's empty dining room, looking out at the space. It had come to life in ways he never expected, and tomorrow, it would be ready to welcome guests from all walks of life. He smiled to himself, finally feeling at peace with the journey ahead. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Harvest and Innovation is about to open its doors, and we can't wait to see what kind of magic happens when we bring people from all cultures together. What does community mean to you, and how can food help bring us closer? Let's talk about it in the comments. The night of Harvest and Innovation's grand opening arrived with an air of palpable excitement. The new restaurant gleamed under the city lights, its contemporary design merging modern elegance with rustic charm. The space was full of life, every corner thoughtfully designed to embody the fusion of tradition and innovation that had defined Jack and Anthony's collaboration. The fusion of cultures, ideas, and culinary philosophies was about to come to life in a way that no one had imagined before. The staff, trained, eager, and proud, bustled around, making last-minute adjustments. Jack stood at the entrance, looking over the final touches as Anthony joined him. Both men had put in countless hours over the past few months, and now they were finally at the threshold of something they had only dreamed of. "Jack," Anthony said, his voice low and full of awe, "do you realize what we've just done? We've created something that's bigger than either of us." Jack looked out across the room, his heart swelling with pride. The energy in the air was electric. "It's not just us, Anthony. This is everyone. The community, the staff, the customers. It's all of us together. We're about to create something that could change the way people think about food." As guests began to arrive, the atmosphere shifted. The energy in the room was contagious as people marveled at the space. The walls were adorned with beautiful murals depicting different cultures and their culinary traditions, a visual representation of the restaurant's mission to celebrate diversity. The open kitchen allowed diners to see the chefs at work, creating an immersive experience that invited everyone to witness the innovation firsthand. The menu was just as innovative. Dishes that had previously existed in isolation were now united on one plate. Traditional dishes like slow-roasted lamb and hearty vegetable stews were paired with experimental flavors, such as miso caramelized mushrooms and a spicy mango tamarind sauce. The combination of bold, unexpected flavors was thrilling, and the guests responded with wide eyes and eager palates. As the evening unfolded, Jack and Anthony were approached by several guests, each one more impressed than the last. One particular customer, a well-known food critic, pulled Jack aside. "I have to say," the critic began, his voice warm with enthusiasm, "you've done something remarkable here. The way you've blended your own culinary heritage with such bold, creative twists, this is unlike anything I've tasted before." Jack smiled, trying to mask the nervous excitement bubbling within him. "Thank you. That means a lot." The critic continued, "I can't wait to write about this place. It's clear that harvest and innovation isn't just about food. It's about bringing people together, creating a space where they can experience something new and still feel at home. You've built more than a restaurant here. You've created a movement." The hours flew by, and the guests were still flowing in, every table filled with people eager to experience the future of dining. The staff was on fire. There was no tension in the air, no sense of chaos. Everything was running smoothly, a testament to all the preparation that had gone into this opening night. Jack found a moment to step outside and take a breath. The night was clear, the city buzzing with energy around him. He gazed up at the sky, reflecting on how far he had come. He thought back to the early days of Carter's Bistro, when he had barely scraped by, unsure of his place in the world of fine dining. And now, here he was, standing in front of a restaurant that was poised to change the landscape of food in the city. But this time, it wasn't just about food. It was about a community coming together to celebrate everything that made them unique, everything that made them human. As he turned back toward the restaurant, he saw Maria walking toward him. She smiled and gave him a nod of approval. "You did it, Jack," she said, her voice steady. "You've created something bigger than you ever thought possible. I'm proud of you." Jack grinned, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. "It's not just me, Maria. It's all of us. And we're just getting started." Later that evening, as the final guests departed and the staff began to clean up, Jack stood beside Anthony at the bar, both men exhausted but exhilarated. "You know," Jack said, his voice full of reflection, "I think we've done more than just open a restaurant. We've shown people that when you embrace change and honor tradition, amazing things can happen." Anthony raised his glass, a wide smile on his face. "To harvest and innovation, and to the future." Jack clinked his glass with Anthony's. "To the future," he agreed, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. As the night came to a close, Jack took one last look around the restaurant. It was quieter now, the energy of the crowd replaced by the peaceful hum of a place that had just begun to make its mark on the world. The journey had been long and full of challenges, but it had been worth every single moment. Jack had come full circle. From the uncertainty of Carter's Bistro to the risk of blending two very different culinary philosophies, he had finally found a way to bring his vision to life without sacrificing the things that mattered most to him. It wasn't just about serving food. It was about creating connections, inspiring change, and building a legacy that would last. He stepped out into the night, feeling the weight of everything that had led him here, and yet, A sense of anticipation for what was to come filled him. This was only the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Harvest and Innovation is officially open, and we couldn't be more excited to share this journey with all of you. What's your favorite fusion of flavors, and how can food bring people from different walks of life together? Join the conversation, and let's build something amazing together.